Chapter 477. The Divine Realm, the Immortal Palace, the Medical Room of the Protoss. Jane, who was unconscious, was lying on a stone bed. Her brows were slightly wrinkled and there was some pain on her face. Next to her was an old wizard in a cloak and holding a staff. His withered palm was facing Jane, and he was chanting a series of incomprehensible spells in a low voice. After a while, the old wizard retracted his palm, and there was no expression on his face. Thor, who had been standing by, couldn't help but ask, "How is Jane? Is she okay?" "Very strange." The old wizard's eyebrows drooped as he looked at Jane and slowly said, "Her body contains a mysterious and powerful force, which is far beyond the limit of what she can bear as a mortal. I dare not cast spells easily. If something goes wrong, it may endanger her life." Thor's face was a little ugly. He stood next to her, and his rough hands carefully held Jane's delicate left hand. "You can leave first." Kale sat on the chair with his legs crossed and said to the old wizard, "Yes, Guardian." The old wizard bowed respectfully to Kale and left the medical room. "Thor, she will be fine." Kale comforted Thor, and his eyes fell on Jane on the stone bed. As the son of the Divine King, Thor couldn't perceive the energy in Jane's body. The wizard could only peek at the tip of the iceberg of the potential energy through spells. However, Kao was different. He could clearly feel the red energy that was almost overflowing in Jen's body. Not only did this energy bring him a threatening aura, but it also gave him an incredible sense of intimacy. The ether seemed to want to communicate with Kale. Was it because he had the power gem? Or was it because of the dual star energy awakened by the space gem in his body? Or perhaps both of them? Kale sank into a long thought. He didn't bring all the infinity gems with him. The mind gem was still kept by Yu Tong, and it overlapped with his telekinetic ability. The space gem was placed in the family Cal base to create cutting-edge weapons with unlimited energy. At the moment, he only had one power gem on him as insurance. After all, with Kale's current strength, no one could pose a fatal threat to him. Coupled with a strength gem that could increase his personal strength at any time, even in the entire Marvel Universe, it was estimated that not many people would dare to fight with him. Before Kale could figure it out, the voice of the guard came from the door. Odin, who was holding a golden scepter, strode into the room. Thor's eyes lit up when he saw Odin. He couldn't help but plead, "Father, please save Jane. With your strength you can definitely do it." Odin glanced at Jane on the stone bed. With a stern face he said in a deep voice, "Thor, you should know that she's not from the same world as us. You shouldn't have taken her back to the Divine Realm without permission. Instead, you should have handed her over to Guardian Kale and the doctors in his world for treatment." Thor grew even more anxious and quickly said, "But inside her body, Before Thor could finish his words, a red energy tide overflowed from Jane's body again. It was like boiling magma surging in the air layer by layer. Thor and even Odin didn't have time to react to the sudden outburst of energy. Kale had already stood up. He took a step forward, his golden eyes shining brightly. His right hand, which was surrounded by dazzling energy, stretched out like lightning. The red energy was manic and violent, and the two-star form was even more fierce and domineering. However, when the two destructive energies collided, they neutralized each other in a gentle and calm way. Rings of dazzling energy lingered around Kale's body. Bathed in the abundant flames, his surging and powerful aura rose one after another, causing the items in the medical room to shake. Compared to Thor and Odin, Kale looked more like a supreme god at this time. His right palm grabbed the air, and Nirvana suppressed the red energy overflowing from Jane's body. Seeing this scene, Odin narrowed his eyes and looked thoughtful. Phew. When the red energy dissipated, Kale exhaled softly and removed the two-star form that seemed to be wearing a halo on his head. Thor looked at Jane's restored face and said excitedly, "Kale, can you control the mysterious energy in Jane's body?" "I don't know, but I can give it a try." Kale shrugged. He was sure that Jane's body was filled with ether particles. This situation was similar to the Rubik's Cube containing the space stone. Without causing any harm to Jane, he was probably the only one in the universe who could take out ether particles. Only drawing cards is the most reliable. However, at the level of the Infinity Stone, it is estimated that it will take a long time to draw the card. Kale secretly pondered. When he first drew the space stone, it took him half an hour to successfully draw it. "Kale, then I'll leave it to you." Thor looked at Kale with blazing eyes. Odin opened his mouth slightly and wanted to say something, but a Protoss guard rushed into the room. His pale face was full of panic and he reported loudly to Odin, "Your Majesty, A large number of enemy warships broke into the Divine Realm from the direction of the Bifrost. They have broken through the first gate of the Divine Realm. What did you say? Thor's eyes widened in disbelief. The last time the Divine Realm was broken, it was because of Loki's cooperation. This time it was actually broken by foreign enemies? Odin clenched his scepter, kept calm and asked calmly, "What enemy is it?" The guard quickly replied, looking at the style of the warship, "It should be the Dark Elves." "Dark Elves? Let's go." Odin snorted coldly, his scepter slammed on the floor, and then left the medical room with the guard. Halfway through, Odin turned back and said, "Kale, I'll leave it to you this time as well." Odin did not speak to Thor again during the whole process. Obviously, because of Jane, he still had some disappointment in Thor. After Odin left, Thor's rough face tightened. He carried Thor's hammer and wanted to rush out, but he was stopped by Kale. Thor looked at Kale in surprise and asked loudly, "Kale, why are you stopping me? Asgard has been invaded. I should be at the front line to stop the enemy's attack. If you leave, what about Jane? You stay here at the Immortal Palace. As for the Bifrost, leave it to me." Kale patted Thor's shoulder, and without waiting for him to respond, he walked out of the door quickly. A big reason why Kale asked Thor to stay was that Jane had ether particles on her, and the Dark Elves were bound to come for the ether particles. "If you want to get the gem of reality, you have to get past me first. I haven't had a real battle for a long time, and my bones are so slow that they're almost stiff." Kale whispered to himself, twisting his neck and wrists slightly, and suddenly there was a thunderous sound like beans being fried. He walked out of the hall of the Golden Palace alone against the holy army that was gathering to protect the Immortal Palace, stood at the edge of the platform, and looked down in the direction of the Bifrost. Rumble. Black T-shaped warships could be seen coming from the starry sky cliff at the end of the Bifrost. Many of them broke away from their stealth camouflage, revealing cold metal shells. After hundreds of black warships broke through the door of the Bifrost, they braved the charging light cannons of the Divine Realm's protective equipment and broke into Asgard. Kale closed his eyes against the strong wind and opened his hands to both sides. When he opened his eyes again, his gold-shredded eyes were burning with flames, and his body was also glowing with the sacred and domineering energy of the two stars. Long time no see, war. Chapter 478. A large-scale war was on the verge of breaking out. Black battleships kept barging in through the Rainbow Bridge, and the defense system of the Divine Palace was fully activated. Mutual bombardment rang out in every corner of Asgard's territory. The destroyed black battleships in the sky turned into ashes, painting the star-studded sky gray. The wreckage of the battleships crashed into the residential area below, causing countless Asgard residents to flee in panic. The Dark Elves were not an ordinary combat race. They had cutting-edge technology and extraordinary physiques. They also had years of experience fighting against the Asgardian gods. Therefore, this fearless raid almost instantly targeted the Divine Palace, which was the center of the Divine Realm. Buzz, some residents of Asgard looked up at the sky in horror. They could see a black T-shaped battleship nimbly dodging the bombardment from the Divine Realm. It weaved through the magnificent golden buildings with ease, and soon, it had completely broken through and approached the Divine Palace. The black battleship had just entered the area in front of the Divine Palace when a dazzling figure leaped up from below. It was like a small sun rising from the horizon, shining brightly and emitting a powerful aura. It accelerated toward the black battleship. What is that? Not only were the Dark Elves stunned, but even the native Asgard residents were also stunned. Fast. Its speed was simply too fast. It was even faster than the laser cannon by a beat. In the blink of an eye, even the black battleship did not have time to dodge or defend. The trajectory of the figure's movement had turned into an arrow of light. It sank into the bottom of the battleship and pierced through the top of the battleship. The battleship's thick metal protective shell was as fragile as tofu. In half a second, the battleship turned into a fireball with thick smoke and fell toward the lake beside the Divine Palace, creating a huge splash. Kale raised his cold golden eyes. He clenched his fists and blasted out two powerful light cannons. In the next moment, the sky above his head seemed to be penetrated by the light cannons. The outline of battleships appeared in the empty area. They had lost control and were forced to descend. It was two black battleships in stealth mode. It had to be said. The super battleships of the Dark Elves could already pass through the Rainbow Bridge and hide from part of the Divine Realm's protective system. What a pity. No matter how stealthy and camouflaged the battleship was, when it passed over Kale's head, the airflow left behind was too obvious to him. Kale turned into a streak of colorful light. Dragging a comet-like tail of flame, he shuttled back and forth in front of the immortal palace. Every punch of his was a beam of light condensed with space energy. Those battleships that could dominate a region of the starry sky were as fragile and powerless as toys in his hands. That's the guardians of the god realm. So strong. Is he really human? That's too outrageous. Many residents of Asgard were dumbfounded as they looked up at the sky. In that instant, Kale had circled the sky more than 3 times, and his strength alone was greater than that of 10 million Holy Army soldiers. Before that, although Odin had personally conferred Kale as a guardian, many residents of Asgard still had doubts about Kale. After all, in the old concept of consciousness, humans were an uncivilized, low-level civilization. But after today's battle, it was believed that no one in the god realm would doubt Kale's strength. Because compared to the invincible Kale, they were undoubtedly more like mortals. Flames burned and rose on the surface of his body. Kale floated 100 meters in the air. He didn't know how many black battleships he had destroyed, but the enemy's fighter jets showed no signs of decreasing. Instead, there were more and more of them. Kale looked coldly in the direction of the Rainbow Bridge. Those black battleships were buzzing and gathering like a swarm of bees. They were still madly rushing toward the immortal palace without fear of death. The civilization forces he had encountered before. The people of Nova knew how to be peaceful and civilized, the people of Kree knew how to fear and retreat, and the current Dark Elves were like a group of mad dogs with a crazy and terrifying obsession. It was as if they would use their entire race and civilization as cannon fodder to achieve their goal by hook or by crook. The effect was undoubtedly significant. Even if the Immortal Palace's defenses were fully activated and Kale was strongly blocking them from the outside, many black battleships still entered the Immortal Palace area. The Dark Elves and the Protoss guards had already started fighting inside the palace. Smoke, shouts, and killing filled the air above the Immortal Palace. I can't stop them. I have to close the Rainbow Bridge door again to cut off their reinforcements and retreat. As for the enemy forces inside, I can only leave them to the Protoss to clean up. Thinking of this, Kale didn't hesitate and directly accelerated to fly in the opposite direction of the black battleships, rushing toward the Rainbow Bridge door. Along the way, the black battleships Kale encountered on the way, as long as they were less than 100 meters away from him, all exploded one after another under the baptism of the fist light cannon, like tragic fireworks blooming in the end of the world. Kale landed on the undamaged Rainbow Bridge and looked around. When he saw that there was no one in the building, he couldn't help but shout, "Heimdall, are you there?" "Heimdall? Yes, I'm here." When Kale shouted the second time, a hand holding a long sword suddenly reached out from the turbulent lake under the Rainbow Bridge, followed by Heimdall's dark head. Kale scooped up Heimdall. Heimdall was wet all over, holding the holy sword with both hands and half kneeling on the Rainbow Bridge. He opened his bloodshot eyes and looked at the black battleships that were constantly entering the divine realm from the cliff at the end of the Rainbow Bridge. "Kale, Guardian, I have to reopen the Rainbow Bridge door and close the passage in and out of the divine realm. What do you need me to do?" Kale asked. "First, find a way to stop the battleships." Heimdall spat out this sentence, holding the holy sword, and ran toward the building at the end of the Rainbow Bridge. "This is simple." Kale took a deep breath, clenched his 5 fingers into a fist, and the dual star energy surged. Under the protection of the flame, he rushed toward the gap in the divine realm's cliff. The gap in the cliff, which was tens of kilometers long and wide, was difficult to seal by himself. Kale waved his left hand and pulled out a creature card. "Venom, you haven't come out to exercise for a long time, right?" "I've been waiting for a long time, my master." After summoning the creature card into a physical form, a linear sticky organism couldn't wait to stick to the surface of Kale's body and entered his body. After Venom entered the body, Kale's aura changed dramatically. His body muscles didn't swell, and the original sacred and dazzling dual star energy turned into an evil dark flame. In the Vulcan form, Venom, who was afraid of fire, couldn't coexist with it, but the dual star form was different. The energy was more towards light and space, so Venom should be able to coexist with it for a short time, within a few seconds of this coexistence. Kale inexplicably raised his palm, and he felt that his strength or energy was unprecedentedly powerful at this moment. Chapter 479. On the cliff at the edge of the divine territory. Kale was suspended in the gray sky thousands of meters above the ground, standing alone against the strong wind and battleships. His eyes were faintly dark red, and his whole body was dark and cold like a humanoid monster. His muscles were no longer bulging and strong like Hulk's, but they were tough and strong like steel. Every pore and hair was burning with black flames. He seemed to be the incarnation of natural disaster, with an indescribable destructive aura inside and outside. This was the enhanced state of Venom symbiosis under the dual star state. It's really successful. Looking down at the palm of the black flames, Kale muttered to himself. He just wanted to try it, but he didn't expect to succeed in symbiosis with Venom in the dual star state, and the effect of the fusion was far beyond his imagination. The extraordinary body in the dual star state has already reached a certain peak in physique and energy, a balanced and perfect state of supreme combat. With the addition of Venom, this balance was completely torn apart and broken. Kale could clearly feel that the power in his body broke through the limit and soared without an upper limit. The energy was unprecedentedly abundant and powerful, but at the same time, it became difficult to control. Even a slight opening of the mouth to breathe would overflow with energy. Even if he didn't breathe, the energy would escape and flow out of the pores. He even had a wonderful sense of perception that he could blow up a life planet with one punch and kick the universe's boundary wall with one kick. This was an illusion due to the fact that his strength was far beyond the original. If this state of overload continues for more than 10 seconds, Kale was convinced that even his body with Protoss genes would not be able to withstand the sequelae of severe overdraft of physical energy. This may not be the critical point height that the current Marvel Universe can reach. Kale's heart flashed with a hint of understanding. He clenched his right fist a little, and the energy of the black flames flowed and gathered. He wanted to vent the excessive energy as soon as possible and then remove the current state of the dual star symbiosis. Forcibly maintaining an uncontrollable state is undoubtedly playing with fire. Then let's try that trick. Kale took a deep breath and sucked all the overflowing energy within a 10-meter radius into his mouth, and then slowly opened his palm in the direction of the void of the divine territory where hostile battleships were still emerging. Thousands of tentacles dash. At this moment, space and time seemed to have stopped. Then, with Kale as the center, circles of air waves and wind pressure expanded out of thin air, dispersing the dark clouds above, revealing the stars in the sky, and pushing away the lake water below to reveal the reefs below. In the main hall of the Immortal Palace, Odin, who had just killed an intruder, suddenly turned around and looked in the direction of the Bifrost, his turbid eyes bursting with light. This feeling is, Kale? Underworld prison. In the dark dimensional world, Hela, whose hair was disheveled, opened her eyes. She looked up at the end of chaos above her head and muttered to herself, Odin? That's not right. That old bastard can no longer reach that level. At the edge of the universe, several humanoid life forms that did not need space equipment and were strolling on non-living stars also sensed something and looked in the direction of the divine domain. Interesting. Another life form almost breaking through the critical point. The universe will soon become lively. The overflowing energy that was wreaking havoc in Kale's body found an outlet, and all of it surged out from his right arm. The black flames formed sharp tentacles that pierced through the air at supersonic speed, growing crazily like vines and seaweed. Dozens of black battleships that had just emerged were completely penetrated in an instant, and then the wreckage was buried by the dense and huge torrent of tentacles. The last time he used thousands of tentacles was when Kale was escaping from planet Sokka. The tentacles covered the entire galactic combat arena, and he also succeeded in defeating a god with the body of a mortal. And this time, the thousands of tentacles, whether it was the number or the attack strength, were more than 10 times stronger than the first time. This was the true thousands. Inside the Bifrost building, Heimdall had just used the holy sword to close the door of the Bifrost. When he came out of the building, the scene that greeted him made him stop in his tracks. His face was dull, and his mouth was wide open as he sucked in a breath of cold air. As the gatekeeper who had guarded the divine realm for many years, Heimdall had a pair of divine eyes that could see the 9 realms, but he had never seen what was happening in front of him. He saw black tentacles burning with flames that plunged deep into the bottom of the lake and went up until they disappeared into the sky. The left and right sides extended to the end that couldn't be reached by the eye. These tentacles just happened to be on one side of the divine realm, completely sealing off the connection between heaven and earth, turning into a black moat that blocked everything on the original cliff waterfall. Above the sky, Kale landed lightly on the Bifrost. His casual clothes were all wet with sweat, and he was panting heavily. The fingers of his left hand were holding the card that Venom had turned into. The double star form had been forcibly removed due to the body's protective mechanism. The thousands of tentacles were like a fatal blow. No matter what, they would exhaust all the energy and physical strength in your body. Kale looked at Heimdall, exhaled a long breath of hot air and shrugged. This is considered blocked, right? The corners of Heimdall's eyes twitched slightly. He looked at the towering mountain range of tentacles beside the Bifrost and sighed from the bottom of his heart. Guardian, no matter what you did just now, the effect is too good. Heimdall was originally like the residents of Asgard, and he was also a little repulsed by Kale, an outsider. But through his eyes he had been paying attention to Kale's rapid growth, and now Kale, who almost single-handedly blocked the enemy's reinforcements, he felt that the faith in his heart was showing signs of collapsing. Is Kale strong? There is no doubt that as a human he is already unreasonably strong. But more importantly, he was always able to create one miracle after another. Every time he did something shocking, he turned fantasy into reality. Go. He is the second person that Heimdall respected the most in his heart after Odin. We have done our best. The rest depends on the Divine Palace. Kale looked up at the Golden Palace on the other side of the Bifrost. Logically speaking, with Odin, Thor as well as the Divine Realm's holy army, it is impossible for them to lose to the surprise attack of the Dark Elves. Unless Odin's current body is even older and weaker than Kale expected. In the Divine Palace. When Kale and Heimdall arrived at the palace, the battle inside had already calmed down. What was left was the wreckage of both sides after the battle, and the ground was littered with sophisticated weapons and warship fragments. Walking further into the palace, Kale saw many surviving Holy Army guards covered in blood. They began to clean up the battlefield step by step, but there was no joy of victory on their faces. Without exception, there was a heavy and mournful look on their faces. Heimdall seemed to have seen the depths of the palace in advance. His body was severely injured. His left foot bent, and he knelt on one knee on the floor, barely supporting his body with the holy sword. Kale knew that something big had happened. He asked in a low voice, Heimdall, what happened inside? Heimdall was silent for a long time. He slowly raised his sad and dark face and said with difficulty, the Queen has died. Chapter 480. The Queen of the Divine Realm. She was Odin's wife and Thor's mother. Her name was Gaia. Kale had seen the Queen a few times before. Her hair was neatly tied up, her eyes sparkled with wisdom, and her every movement was dignified and elegant. But this time the Queen was lying silently in the coffin forever. Her face was expressionless. Even if she was killed by the Dark Elves, it was obvious that she died peacefully without pain. But the Queen's departure brought endless grief to the living of the Divine Realm. In the main hall of the Divine Palace, after the guards had temporarily cleaned it up, the golden floor was as clean as new. Only the smell of blood and smoke faintly floated in the air. Thor was next to the Queen's coffin. His hands were clenched into fists and his knees were on the ground. His body could not stop trembling. He tried hard to clench his teeth and forced himself not to make any sound. Jane had woken up at some point. She stood behind Thor and put her hands on his broad shoulders. Her pale face was also filled with grief. Odin sat alone on the throne of the Divine Realm. His only remaining eye was looking directly at the coffin in the hall. His wrinkled face was as calm as before, but his shoulders were slightly trembling. At this moment, the monarch who had ruled over the 9 worlds for countless years seemed to have aged 10 years again. The Divine Palace guards and wizards in the main hall all looked sad, causing the magnificent main hall to fall into a silent and sorrowful atmosphere. Kale did not stand with anyone. He crossed his arms and leaned against a pillar in the corner of the main hall. Looking at the scene of silent mourning in the main hall, he could not help but sigh in his heart. Not in the future but from this moment onwards. As one of the strongest forces in the Marvel Universe, the Divine Realm was going to go downhill from now on. Or it could be said that since the second Prince Loki's betrayal, the Divine Palace, which stood proudly at the top of the legends, went from being prosperous to being in decline. The god King Odin was getting old and decaying. The Queen of Elysium was dead, and Loki was still secretly sabotaging things. Thor was unable to fully shoulder the responsibility of being the king. The decline of the royal family of the realm of the gods also foreshadowed the imminent destruction of Asgard. In the future, there might no longer be legends about the Rainbow Bridge and the Golden Immortal Palace. These were other people's family affairs and national affairs. Naturally, it had nothing to do with Kale. He had already done everything he should do as a guardian, and that was enough. At the moment, the only thing that Kale was truly concerned about was the ether particles lurking in Jane's body. Wait, ether? Kale's face changed slightly as he suddenly realized that something was wrong. His eyes quickly fell on Jane, who was in the main hall. From her body, The previous sense of intimacy and destructive aura had disappeared. The ether particles were no longer in Jen's body. What was going on? If the Dark Elves had succeeded, Jane wouldn't have been able to stand in the main hall safely. Could it be that in the Immortal Palace just now, in addition to the realm of the gods and the Dark Elves, there was a third party secretly involved? Cale's brain was like a supercomputer. His thoughts were running rapidly in his mind, thinking about whether he had missed out on important information. At the same time, he expanded his extraordinary thoughts and senses outwards, covering the entire main hall of the Immortal Palace and extending outwards one after another. At this moment, Cale seemed to have noticed something. He suddenly turned around and looked outside the main hall. From the depths of the Immortal Palace, he sensed two familiar auras. It was because of the familiarity that there was such a strong sense of dissonance. The guards and wizards in the main hall, including Thor and Odin, were still silent in grief. Obviously, they didn't notice that an outsider had sneaked into the Immortal Palace at this time. Cale quietly retreated. He was originally in a corner. After a few steps, he left the main hall without anyone noticing. Inside the Immortal Palace, in a room near the residence of the god race, a team of burly guards in golden armor were patrolling the corridor. Just as they passed by, a tall young man walked out from the shadows behind a pillar, tiptoeing. The tall young man was wearing a white, tight-fitting uniform that gave off a technological vibe. He carried a silver suitcase in his left hand and a hammer similar to the Thor in his right hand. He sneaked in with his back against the wall of the corridor. The time of arrival is correct. According to Thor's instructions, I just need to put the ether in his room, the tall young man muttered to himself. After he found his ultimate goal among the many mansions and rooms in the corridor, he no longer hesitated and quickly walked forward. He opened the door and entered the room. Before the patrolling guards of the realm of the gods returned, he closed the door in a thrilling manner. Fortunately, everything went smoothly. The tall young man patted his chest and exhaled. However, after turning around, all his movements came to a halt. He saw Cale sitting on a chair in the room. He crossed his legs and rested his chin on his hand. His golden eyes narrowed slightly as he sized up the young man. He said faintly, "What kind of explanation do you want to give me?" "My friend Steve." "That's right." The one who had inexplicably sneaked into the realm of the gods was actually Captain America, Steve Rogers. Before Steve could answer, Cale touched his chin and said, "You are not the Steve I know." "Wait, is that Thor's hammer you're holding in your hand?" His identity was easily exposed. Steve smiled bitterly. He simply put down Thor's hammer and suitcase and found a place to sit down. "Cale, to be honest, I'm most worried about you when I travel through time. After all, no matter how careful I am, I can't hide from you." Cale looked at him in surprise. "Travel through time? So, you're from another time and space?" Steve nodded and said, "Yes, I'm from the future a few years later. Last time, someone from our time and space also came to the current time and space and took away the ether particles from Jane's body. Now, I'm here to return the gemstone." At the same time, Steve opened the suitcase and took out a glass bottle. A ball of red mist kept on seething inside. It was the ether particles that had been extracted. A hint of greed flashed in Cale's eyes. He stood up calmly from the chair and took the glass bottle that contained the ether particles from Steve's hands. He asked casually, "You took away the gemstone from the current time and space and now you're returning it. What do you want to do?" Steve hesitated for a moment. In the end, he shook his head and said softly, "I'm sorry, Cale. I can't tell you this. If you know too much, it might not be a good thing for your time and space. Even if it's me, I can't tell you." Cale rubbed the glass bottle containing the ether particles and put it in his pocket. He waved his hand and said, "All right then. Forget it, take a seat first. I'll get you some wine. We haven't had a drink in a long time." After Cale finished speaking, he walked straight to the door of the room. Looking at Cale's back, Steve suddenly had an ominous feeling. It seemed that once Cale left the room, something terrible would happen. "Wait, Cale." Steve got up and tried to call out to Cale. Cale's hand was already on the door handle. He turned his head. When he saw the uneasy expression on Steve's face, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up into an evil smile. Steve felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He said with difficulty, "You're not Cale." After deceiving people so many times, he was finally deceived back. Chapter 481. Divine Realm Palace of Immortals in a room belonging to Thor. "Veteran. You got it right. Unfortunately, there's no reward." Cale smiled evilly. As his body changed, his silver hair turned black. His face became paler and more feminine. His casual clothes turned into a slim-fit uniform. His real identity was Loki, the evil god who had escaped from Earth with the Tesseract last time. Loki didn't expect to be so lucky as to sneak back to the Divine Realm during the chaos and run into Steve, who was returning the gem. Loki, give me back the ether particle. It belongs to this time and space, but it shouldn't fall into your hands. Steve gritted his teeth and stared straight at Loki. He clenched his fist slightly, and the Thor hammer on the ground suddenly flew into his right hand. Thunder electricity sizzled from the handle of the hammer and wrapped around Steve's arm. His eyes were filled with intimidating electricity. Loki's face was gloomy and uncertain. He looked at Steve's right hand, which was holding the hammer, and said in a low voice with a little reluctance, "Thunder God's hammer, you didn't even acknowledge me. In the end, you acknowledged a mortal outside the Divine Realm?" Steve raised the Thor hammer surrounded by electric arcs and said to Loki bluntly, "Hand it over. This is the last warning." Loki wasn't scared. Instead, he smiled evilly and said, "What if I don't hand it over? Then I'll teach you a lesson on behalf of your brother." As soon as Steve finished speaking, he seemed to be unable to hold it in any longer. He swung the Mjolnir in his hand, and a powerful and terrifying bolt of lightning also struck down, snaking towards Loki, who was standing at the door. Then goodbye. Loki didn't want to fight with the future Steve. He flipped his left hand and a cracked tesseract appeared. In the blink of an eye, Rocky used the spatial energy to open up a cloud of spatial fog, and his body disappeared from the room without a trace. Steve's pupils contracted violently. He forcefully pulled the Thor hammer back, but it was difficult to retract the strong electric shock he released. The lightning struck the door of the room fiercely, sending the entire golden door flying with an extremely loud rumbling sound. What happened? It's the eldest prince's room. Quick. Let's go and take a look. The guards of the Immortal Palace who were patrolling nearby all followed the strange sound and rushed to the room where Steve was. This is bad. Steve's lips twitched. He had never expected that their last battle in New York would indirectly cause Loki to escape with the Tesseract. This unforeseen event not only affected the history of the current time and space, but also affected him, a person from the future time and space. Loki was not arrested by the Avengers in the Battle of New York, so he was not imprisoned in the Immortal Palace prison according to the original history. Instead, he was still free to move around in the dark of the universe. In addition, Loki had the Tesseract, which had not completely lost its spatial energy, which allowed him to descend or escape to any spatial region at will. Could be said that, now Loki was the strongest shit-stirrer, making a mess of the original history. There was no time to think. Steve heard intensive footsteps approaching along the corridor. His body couldn't help but tense up. He had to escape from here first. If he was caught by the people of the Divine Realm in the current time and space, he would really be finished. It was just that in the heavily guarded Divine Realm, it was impractical to rely on the Thor hammer to escape. Can I only leave the current time and space first? This thought came to Steve's mind. He was about to take action when the many footsteps coming from afar stopped abruptly. What are you doing? A cold and calm voice sounded. Steve's expression changed. This voice was, in the corridor of the Immortal Palace. When the guard captain saw Kale, he couldn't help but say respectfully, "Guardian, we heard a strange sound coming from the prince's room, so we specially—" Kale waved his hand and said casually, "That's enough." "What strange sound?" "I accidentally kicked the door." "I see." The guard captain showed a look of understanding. If it was before, he might have doubted Kale's words. But after the battle in the morning, all the people of the Divine Realm were convinced by Kale's powerful strength. Kale said lightly, "Now the entire Divine Palace is mourning the Queen. Don't make a fuss. Return to your original position and continue patrolling. After the funeral, send someone to repair the door." "Yes, Guardian, you're right." The guard captain quickly nodded and glanced at the golden door in front of him. Then he gathered a large number of guards and hurriedly withdrew to the surrounding corridors. After the guards of the Divine Realm left, Kale's face remained calm. He slowly walked forward and entered the room that had lost its door. Kale's golden eyes flickered as he scanned the empty room and the Thor hammer on the table. He said angrily, "Why are you still hiding? Do you think you can hide your existence from me?" Gotcha. The antique wardrobe was pushed open from the inside, and Steve walked out with a suitcase. Steve looked at Kale dejectedly and said bitterly, "Thank you for helping me out. Kale, you should be real this time, right? Do you think I'm fake?" Kale frowned slightly as if he had understood something. He narrowed his eyes and said, I also sensed Loki's existence just now. He was also here, right? He even pretended to be me and met you. Steve sighed helplessly. He used your identity and tricked the ether away from me. Kale took a few steps forward and looked at Steve in front of him. He thought and said, "You are not the Steve I know. The one Yutong said earlier, the one who could fly and discharge electricity, broke into the unnatural office building, and returned the spirit gem was you, right?" "Yes." Steve nodded. Kale said calmly, "You appeared in the battle in New York half a year ago, right? At that time, you wanted to take the Tesseract and fought with the Steve of that time. You were almost beaten to the ground by him." "Yes." Steve nodded again. Kale continued, "Caesar left with you at that time, right?" "Yes, that's right." Steve spread out his hands and said in a low voice, "But Caesar didn't come back. This is also something I didn't expect." Kale smiled calmly. "After all, I had many guesses before. Now that I see you, all my guesses are connected." "But," Kale changed the topic, "I still have many questions that I need to get answers from you. If the ether gem of reality was lost, then so be it. At most, he could find it back in the future. What was more important now was the significance of the other Steve appearing here. This was the first time that Kale felt that there were more things in the Marvel Universe that were out of his control. This couldn't be helped. After all, he had just seen the Avengers in his previous life and had hurriedly transmigrated. Now, Kale was using his own life and life to pursue the unfinished plot of the Avengers. Steve and Kale looked at each other and finally relented. "No problem, Kale. Ask whatever you want to ask. I have plenty of time to waste anyway. However, I won't tell you anything that involves destroying your current time and space. I hope you can understand." "No problem." Chapter 482. Above the 9 realms, there was a rainbow bridge and a magnificent golden palace. This was the Asgard divine realm, which had ruled over many civilizations and races. It was an ancient and immortal legend passed down in the universe, respected and worshipped by thousands of creatures in the universe. But tonight, the divine realm, which had always been high and mighty, was full of depression and sadness in every corner, from the divine palace to the civilian streets. The civilians of Asgard, young and old, walked out of their houses and onto the streets. Their faces were full of sadness, and they held lit candles in their hands as they walked towards the lake in the direction of the Bifrost to bid farewell to Queen Frigga, who was widely loved by the people. In front of the divine palace, Odin, the divine king, and Thor, the father and son, stood side by side. Behind them were a group of soldiers and wizards, including Jane, who was a human woman. They quietly watched the maids of the divine realm send Frigga, who was sleeping in the flower coffin, to the lake in the divine realm. The funeral of the queen of the divine realm had begun. Even the sky seemed to be sad. Even the stars in the divine realm's night sky were much dimmer tonight. The faint starlight fell on the Rainbow Bridge Lake. No one noticed. At this moment, on the top of a tower in the golden immortal palace, 2 tall young men, one with silver hair and one with golden hair, with eyes as bright as stars, sat together in a high place where the wind was howling. They looked down at the funeral site that was decorated with stars and lights. "Steve." Kale waved his left hand and took out 2 bottles of good wine from the card space. After summoning them, he threw one of them to Steve. "Thanks." Steve had removed the protective hood and raised his hand to take the bottle. He looked down and saw the 1944 brand on it. He couldn't help but smile. How thoughtful. "Kale, we haven't sat together for a drink in a long time, right?" "Yes, it still tastes the same. Do you want to try it now?" Kale smiled and pressed gently with his fingernail. The cork of the bottle was directly burned into nothingness by a wisp of flame. "Come on, I'm not afraid of you." Steve smiled and opened the bottle cap. The two raised the bottle and clinked it in the air like wine glasses. Bam. Gulp gulp. After the collision, Kale and Steve did not seem to want to admit defeat. Facing the cool night breeze, they drank all the wine in the bottle in one gulp. Phew, that felt great. Putting down the bottle, Steve let out a long sigh of relief. He looked at Kale beside him with a complicated expression in his blue eyes. Who would have thought that as comrades, Steve and Kale had only drunk together 3 times in their lives? The first time was in a European bar during World War II. Kale and Steve were in the limelight in the military. At that time, Howard, who was the chief scientist of the science department, and Agent Carter were also in their prime. The second time was in the 21st century. After Steve recovered from the ice, he drank with Kale in front of Carter's grave. The third time was now. One person came from the future a few years later, and the other was in the present time and space. They met each other in a strange way. They were able to put down their worries and battles and sit together peacefully to drink and chat. It has to be said that life is so wonderful. After Kale put down the bottle, he thought, "You said that you came from the future after 2025. The Avengers in the future collected Infinity Stones from various time and space, and now you have come to return them. So, in the end you still won? It's a win, but it's also a loss. What's important is not the outcome, but the process we have experienced." Steve gave a vague answer. He lowered his head and looked down deeply at the flower basket wooden coffin that carried the queen into the lake. The flower basket wooden coffin, under the gaze of countless people in the divine realm, floated along the lake to the waterfall at the end of the Rainbow Bridge. Kale said calmly, "No matter what the outcome is, you still completely lost once. Otherwise, you wouldn't have taken the risk to go to various time and space to borrow Infinity Stones." Only this matter still made Kale unable to let go. To be able to let the future Steve and others return to the past time and space was undoubtedly a gamble to reverse the failed and desperate future outcome. Under this premise, it can be inferred that the future the Avengers, including family Cal and Kale, have all lost. Is this possible? No matter how much Kale doubts, at present, since there is the future Steve, it means that some things in the future time and space have become history. They had really lost. They had suffered a crushing defeat. Steve sighed softly. "Kale, this is what I'm worried about. If I tell you about our failure in advance, you will have excessive doubts about yourself, or feel uncertain about the victory that can't be ushered in. In a future where you already know that you are about to face a cruel failure, even a superhero will be defeated in an instant, right?" Kale was silent and didn't speak. "But I still told you why. I should believe in you." Steve looked extremely serious. He turned sideways and looked directly at Kale with a smile. "Compared to myself, I'm more willing to believe in you. Is it really okay for you to be full of confidence in me?" Kale shrugged and said, "I also failed. At the beginning, before you drove the out-of-control fighter into the sea, you entrusted Paige to me. But I still failed to live up to your expectations and didn't protect her at all." "Not at all." Kale's heart ached faintly. This is a regret that he can't make up for in his life. Hearing Kale's self-blame, Steve laughed instead. "Kale, you haven't asked her, how do you know that she wasn't protected? How do you know what kind of mood she had in the end?" Kale trembled slightly and said to Steve, "Steve, could it be that you—" "Yes, on the way to return the Infinity Stones I went back to the past, that is, at the end of World War II, a few months after you left the Earth. I stayed there for half a year until Paige passed away due to childbirth." Steve raised his head, patted Kale on the shoulder, looked at him enviously and said with emotion, "Carter said that she never regretted liking you, that was the least regretful thing in her life." "Is that so?" "I see," Kale muttered to himself, feeling that the things that had been bothering him for so long were finally put down at this moment. Steve smiled and said, "Kale, I really envy you. Not only because of Paige but also because we were born in the same barracks, but you are the symbol of peace and I am just Captain America. You are the radiant sun to the world and I am just a relatively bright star. If even you don't believe in yourself, who can believe in this world and the future?" "I understand what you mean." Kale smiled and suddenly stood up from the peak of the tower, facing the whistling wind. "Don't worry, I never want to give up the fight. Your future spacetime has been defeated, but it doesn't mean that the future of my spacetime is the same. If it is a fact that we are about to face failure, then I will change this cruel fact." Kale's firm words just fell. Chapter 483. The future Captain America came in a hurry and left in a hurry. Although he had a lot of time and could stay in the present time and space, he had no nostalgia or sense of belonging to this place. In this world, it was enough to have one Captain America. With the previous concept of Superman's clone Caesar, Captain America used the Pym particles to leave the present time and space before the dawn of the divine domain, leaving Kale with infinite imagination and a sense of crisis. First, he lost the ether particle, which was the gem of reality, and then he learned the historical fact that the Avengers were defeated in the future. How could Kale continue to enjoy his vacation in peace? "It seems that I have to intervene in the divine domain as soon as possible. When I return to Earth, there are still many plans that need to be carried out further." Inside the God's Domain's mansion, which had been assigned to him, someone knocked on his door before Kyle had the chance to consider his options. "Who is it?" Although he felt a familiar aura, Kale still asked faintly toward the door. "Kale, it's me." Thor's voice was a little anxious, as if he was looking for Kale for something urgent. "Come in." Kale waved his hand toward the door and gravity immediately unlocked the door. As soon as the door was opened, Thor, who was in the corridor outside, walked in quickly, not forgetting to violently close the door. "You're the host, I'm the guest. But I'll still treat you to a drink to calm down." Kale raised his finger slightly, and the wine bottle flew up automatically, filling the glass with wine. Then the glass flew toward Thor with bubbles. Thor did not stand on ceremony. He grabbed the glass and drank it all in one gulp, then slammed it on the table. He used so much force that even the glass almost shattered. Kale looked up at Thor and said calmly, "Speak. It's early in the morning, why are you looking for me in such a hurry?" Thor's face was a little ugly. He said, "Last night, as soon as Mother's funeral was over, Father sent guards to arrest Jane and lock her up in a room deep in the Immortal Palace. Father said that there are ether particles in Jen's body, and the Dark Elves came for the ether particles. He's not wrong to think that way. At the very least, the ether particles can't fall into the hands of the Dark Elves." Kale nodded slightly. Odin, Thor, and the others still did not know that there were no more ether particles in Jane's body. Instead, they had fallen into the hands of the evil god Loki, who was a traitor to the divine territory. Regarding this point, Kale naturally couldn't say it out loud. Thor said indignantly, "I originally wanted you to extract the ether from Jen's body, but Father didn't agree. I requested to take the initiative to attack and destroy the Dark Elves, but Father still refused without hesitation. Thor, if you're old, you might make the same decision." Kale smiled faintly. Whether it was humans or gods, the older they got, the easier it was for them to lose their fighting spirit. They were afraid of losing what they still had, so they lived more pedantically. Odin, the king of the gods, was no exception. If it was 1,000 years ago or even 100 years ago, Kale believed that Odin would definitely bring the entire holy army, put aside all concerns, and directly charge into the heart of the Dark Elves planet. Even if both sides suffered losses again, he would spread Asgard's supreme reputation. But now, Odin was old, no longer handsome, his hot blood was cold, his battle strength was gone, and his divine power was fading. So even if the Dark Elves charged into the divine territory, and even the queen was killed, Odin still did not dare to take the initiative to attack for the sake of the divine territory. Odin was not wrong, he was just Thor's appearance when he was old. "No, even if I'm old, I'll never become an old man like him." Thor snorted coldly. He raised his head slightly, his golden hair shining like an angry and mighty lion. "Since King Odin is unwilling to agree to your request, what do you want from me now?" Kale looked at Thor as if he had seen through everything and asked meaningfully. Thor took a deep breath and said bluntly, "I want to take Jane and leave the divine territory. Not only that, I want to go to the Dark Elves' territory and avenge my dead mother." This sentence meant that Thor was going to defy Odin's orders and test the waters on the verge of defecting to the divine territory. However, Thor's bold idea coincided with Kale's. It was too much of a waste of time to defend in the divine territory and wait for the Dark Elves to come knocking. Instead of defending, it was better to take the initiative to attack and kill all the Dark Elves. This was the simplest and most brutal way to solve the problem. "But my strength alone is far from enough, so I need your help, Kale." Thor looked at Kale with a sincere gaze, waiting for his reply with slight apprehension. Without Kale's strength, he might not even be able to break through the door of the divine territory with Jane. "Thor, you're asking me to take the risk of betraying the divine territory." Kale smiled. "Yes, I know." Thor clenched his fists and promised, "As long as you help me this time, no matter what you encounter in the future, just say the word. Thor will definitely complete it for you." "That's what you said." Kale's eyes lit up. "Yes, Thor said it." Looking at the solemn Thor, Kale sighed softly and spread his hands. "All right then. Anyway, I'm not loyal to the divine territory, and there's no betrayal to speak of. Now tell me about your plan." "That's great." Thor was overjoyed. He coughed and began to talk about his plan. "I'm going to," half an hour later. In the main hall of the Celestial Palace. Odin was walking to the hall with his scepter. Before he could sit on the throne, a guard outside the hall rushed into the hall anxiously and reported loudly with a dry mouth, King. Thor broke into the depths of the Celestial Palace and took away that human woman by force. He used the Dark Elf spaceship that we seized to escape. He's fleeing in the direction of the Rainbow Bridge." Odin frowned and gripped the scepter tightly with his left hand. Without thinking too much, he ordered angrily, "Quick! Go and inform Guardian Kale to stop Thor's spaceship. Don't let him take half a step out of the divine territory." "King." The guard almost cried and continued, Guardian, he's also on that spaceship. What did you say? Odin could no longer hold it in. He knocked the scepter heavily on the floor, making a dull and loud sound, scaring the guard who came to report into silence. Outside the golden celestial palace, a black T-shaped spaceship was escaping quickly. Inside the spaceship, Vice was connected to the cockpit and piloted unmanned. Thor and Jane sat in the back row holding hands. Kale, who was sitting in the front row, turned around and asked Thor helplessly, "Your so-called plan, is this?" "It's not bad." Thor did not know his own plan at all. What kind of plan was this? He was just going to be reckless all the way. Kale shook his head. At this moment the spaceship trembled violently. Vice's urgent voice sounded, "Master. The defense system of the divine territory has been activated and is trying to shoot down the spaceship." "Father is angry," Thor muttered to himself. He held Jane's soft little hand in his left hand and the Thor's hammer that Steve secretly returned to him with his right hand. His eyes became more and more determined. There's no turning back. Chapter 484. The light cannons of the Divine Realm's Divine Palace were all raised and aimed at the Dark Elf spaceship that was escaping out of the Rainbow Bridge. The battleship drifted nimbly and easily dodged the first wave of attacks. Not bad. Inside the battleship, Kale praised and said calmly, "Vice, it's up to you. Leave it to me." As soon as Vice finished speaking, the speed of the spaceship increased by another level. While dodging the laser cannons, the distance between them and the Rainbow Bridge kept shrinking. Jane's beautiful eyes widened in horror. She wanted to look but didn't dare to. Thor beside her patted her hand and laughed heartily. "Don't worry, Kale and the rest are veterans. Master, there's an unbreakable obstacle ahead," Vice suddenly warned. "Obstacle?" Kyle raised his eyes in surprise and looked through the windshield. He could see that at the end of the Rainbow Bridge, there was a natural moat covered with dark barbs, standing coldly between the heavens and the earth of the Divine Realm. "I almost forgot about that." Kale slapped his forehead. That was created by his own ultimate move. Previously, it had easily blocked the Dark Elves' follow-up battleships. "I'll go out and blast it open," Thor suggested. "Let me do it." "You don't know how hard that thing is." Kale shrugged. The tentacles had the strength to penetrate the body of a god, not to mention the moat formed by the tentacles. Other than himself, there were probably not many people who could deal with it quickly. Vice maintained speed and crashed directly into the tentacles. After Kale gave the order, he opened the safety door and jumped out of the cabin. In the air, the dazzling energy of the two stars gradually ignited until it completely covered the outside of his tall body. Whoosh! Kale turned into a dazzling stream of light and caught up with the Dark Elves' battleship. He came to the top of the battleship's bow and pressed his back directly against the steel shell. Under the control of Vice, the battleship accelerated and carried Kale directly into the moat of tentacles. Ha! At the same time, Kale suddenly stretched out his fists. The energy of the two stars, which had already been charged, was stronger than the Rainbow Bridge's beam of light. It crashed into the moat of the mountain ahead before the battleship. Boom! 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 Part of the moat of tentacles originally had the energy of the two stars. Now, under the powerful impact of the energy of the two stars, it instantly melted at a visible speed. With the energy of Kyle's two stars opening the way, the Dark Elf battleship passed through the massive circular pit without any obstruction. It crossed the Rainbow Bridge from the completely sealed Divine Realm and arrived at the dazzling starry sky outside. "This should do it." Kare exhaled softly, his eyes burning with flames. He stood on the battleship and looked back at the floating land of the Divine Dominion before returning to the battleship through the safety door. "Our Vice. I'm going to jump to the world where the Dark Elves are through the save point recorded on this battleship." "We are ready." Kale nodded and looked at Thor. Thor's hair stood on end. "Of course, I can't wait to smash my hammer on the face of the Dark Elves' leader, the Mox." "Good. Let's start the jump now." Vice pressed a button. The battleship immediately disappeared from the vast universe and entered a broken space jump point. Kale and the other two in the battleship felt their vision blur. Accompanied by the chaotic distortion of space, the scenery in front of the windshield of the battleship changed from the boundless space to a desolate world full of battleship wreckage. The sky and earth were pitch black. It was a desolate world that had lost its light due to the dark fog. "This is the Dark World." Thor let go of Jane's hand and whispered. Vice reported, 3 battleships of the same model have been detected below. They seem to be waiting for us. What should we do, Master? We're already here. What else can we do? Let's go down now. Kale quickly made a decision. The battleship continued to slow down. It stopped on a small hill about 100 meters away from the Dark Elves. The hatch opened. Kale, Thor and Jane walked down. The environment of the dark world was extremely harsh. Black fog lingered and sand billowed. A group of people also came down from the battleship about 100 meters away. It was the team of Dark Elves led by the Mox. Welcome to the Dark World and welcome for bringing the ether particles here. Mox welcomed Kale and the other two with open arms. He was not tall, and his appearance was that of a black and white humanoid elf. The Dark Elves were not good at magic, but they were good at strengthening their bodies. They were a fighting race that was not inferior to Asgard. They had powerful strength that far exceeded that of humans, especially the cursed warriors of their race. They were extremely strong and could not die. Kale, help me look after Jane. I'll go and send that bastard flying right now. When enemies met, their eyes turned red. When Thor saw the Mox, he thought of his dead mother. He could not hold it in anymore. He waved Thor's hammer and rushed toward the Dark Elves at high speed. Thor! Jane shouted and wanted to rush forward. In the end, she was stopped by Kale. Don't worry. He's Thor. He'll be fine. Kale smiled faintly and looked ahead. He could take this opportunity to see the combat power of the Dark Elves. On the battlefield below, Thunder God's red cloak fluttered in the wind. Thunder God held Thunder God's hammer in his hand and rushed towards Malak Kaiser like a meteor. Mox did not move. The cursed warrior, who had been standing behind him, suddenly took a few steps forward and blocked in front of Mox with his tall and burly body. His thick arms swung out like lightning and sent Thor flying with his hammer. The cursed warrior laughed and continued to move forward. He picked up a stone that weighed more than 10 tons and threw it at Thor. Oh, a cursed warrior? Not bad, but still a little weaker than Hulk. Kale saw this scene and commented softly. On the other side, Thor quickly got up from the ground and threw out Thor's hammer to smash the flying stone into pieces. He fought with the cursed warrior in the waves of gravel and dust, causing a lot of air waves to sweep out more than 50 meters. Kale gently waved his left hand and formed a repulsive air wall, blocking all the dust waves that came toward him and protecting Jane beside him. Mox looked away from Thor and fixed his eyes on Jane not far away. He gave orders to the Dark Elven guards beside him. The Dark Elven guards nodded and bypassed the battlefield of Thor and the cursed warrior from both sides, attacking Kale and Jane. Kale, Jane said uneasily and hid behind Kale's shoulder, trembling. They're finally attacking us? Kale smiled and narrowed his eyes. If they don't come, I'll be bored. Jane, don't be more than 5 meters away from me, Kale said indifferently. I know. Jane nodded like a rattledrum. Hiding behind Kale, she felt more at ease than ever before. This was natural. After all, this was the symbol of peace, the strongest combat power on Earth. Chapter 485. Thud, thud, thud. At the bottom of the hill, the fully armed Dark Elf army with high-tech firearms rushed towards Kyle and Jane on the hill along with the sand and the storm. Want free look, whole, edition, please, 100, search. The numbers were completely out of proportion. But for some reason, the closer the Dark Elves took, the greater the fear in their hearts. It was as if they had stepped into a land of death, and there was a sense of oppression strangling their throats. Was it an illusion? They felt that they were not facing 1 or 2 people but an entire army. Such thoughts appeared in the minds of countless Dark Elves for no reason. Kill that human man and take the human woman. This is the leader's order. The leader of the Dark Elves growled. When the fearless Dark Elves were 20 meters away, they aimed their high-tech firearms at Kale, who was at the front. This distance was just right. Kale's face was calm. He suddenly took a step forward, and as his foot landed on the ground, a white aura and powerful pressure expanded outward. The sand and wind, under some kind of force, reversed and rushed toward the Dark Elf army. Gravitational traction, slaughter dominance, double explosion. This is... After entering the 20-meter area, the Dark Elves' expressions changed. The mysterious fear that lingered in their hearts had turned into a concrete and terrifying pressure. They felt as if their bodies were filled with lead and extremely heavy. Their feet felt like they had sunk into a quagmire, and it was difficult for them to move forward. The Dark Elves were almost out of breath. Their hearts kept beating at a high rate. What kind of human man is that? He's clearly a humanoid ancient monster. The Dark Elf captain raised his head with difficulty and looked at Kale, who was not far away. He ordered intermittently, "Everyone fire." Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Suddenly dozens of blue laser beams shot toward Kale, interweaving into a terrifying light net. Obviously, the Dark Elves had to ignore Jane's attack in such a situation. Gravitational traction, the highest multiplier. Kale raised his hands. Before the laser beams reached him, they kept moving toward the sky and made a sharp turn above his head. Even laser beams are ineffective? Try this. The Dark Elf captain gritted his teeth and suddenly threw an item that looked like a grenade with a flashing red light. Fall. Seeing this, many Dark Elves instinctively crouched and fell to the ground. Who's that? Kale narrowed his eyes and sensed a dangerous aura from it. He could not help but construct an air wall with the repulsive force and place it in front of him to defend in all directions. Just as he completed this simple emergency measure, the grenade exploded in midair, right between Kale and the Dark Elf. A large, dazzling black hole exploded in the air. Then everything within a radius of 10 meters, including wind, sand, stones, light, and even gravitational air, was swallowed into the black hole. The powerful explosive did not differentiate between friend and foe. Not only did it destroy Kale's temporary air wall and repulsive field, but it also sucked in a few Dark Elves who couldn't dodge in time and turned them into minced meat. The black hole lasted for a full 5 seconds. When it was over, it automatically disappeared along with the things it had swallowed, and everything returned to its original state. Just now. What happened? Jane secretly poked her head out from behind Kale. The high-tech weapons developed by the Dark Elves were far beyond her imagination as an astronomy graduate student from Earth. A bomb from the Dark Elves? Even the repulsive force was absorbed and destroyed? Kale looked at the Dark Elves who had regained their freedom of movement. He had an impression of the black hole bomb just now. He seemed to have drawn it a long time ago and used it to break out of the encirclement during the battle with the Japanese army. It was just that the power of that bomb was far greater than the previous one. Take advantage of this opportunity and advance. The Dark Elf captain waved his hand forward and led the group of Dark Elves forward. Who dares? At this moment there was a loud noise in the sky. A massive object fell from the sky and blocked in front of Kale, kicking up a small hurricane-like dust. What's this thing this time? The Dark Elf captain's face froze. He looked up and saw a robot standing on 2 limbs. It was 25 meters tall and nearly 7 meters wide. Its appearance was similar to the modified Dark Elves battleship, and its entire body was also glowing with a black metallic luster. With me the Vice 2.0 evolved transformer, who dares to attack my master? Vice grinned and raised its mechanical hands. A laser cannon hole with a radius of 1 meter appeared on its hands. Compared to it, the high-tech firearms in the Dark Elves' hands were as powerless as a millet and a rifle. What's the point of calling a bunch of underlings to be cannon fodder? You don't know my strength and don't dare to attack? Kale shook his head and looked up with his golden eyes. His gaze passed by Vice and the Dark Elf army and landed on the leader of the Dark Elves, Mox, 100 meters away. Mox still had an indifferent expression. It was as if the life and death of the Dark Elves had nothing to do with him. To him, everyone was just a chess piece in the game of chess that led to victory. He would not entrust too many emotions to them. Thor and the Cursed Warrior were still locked in battle. At times, Thor would be dragged and sent flying, and at other times the Cursed Warrior would be sent flying by an electric hammer. It would take more than a minute or two to determine the victor. On the other side. Somewhere in the world of darkness, a giant spaceship in the shape of a sugar circle broke through the fog and approached the battle between Kale and the others. Master said that we must obtain the ether particles. Then we must kill anyone who stands in our way regardless of the cost. On the control panel of the spaceship, there were only 2 strange-looking creatures conversing in a low voice. They were like the top predators standing on the pyramid of the universe, exuding an oppressive aura that made one's heart palpitate. General Thanos was about to attack. On the sand battlefield in the ruins, the battle between the Vice and the Dark Elven army was about to break out. In an instant, laser cannons bombarded each other, turning the area within a 50-meter radius into scorched earth. Kale blocked the aftershock with a repulsive force. Sensing that Jane was retreating in fear, he could not help but say, "Be careful, don't be more than 5 meters away from me." Jane, who had already walked a few meters away, stopped in time. Just as she was panting, a cloud of spatial fog suddenly appeared under her feet, causing her to fall straight down. Even though he was not in the form of 2 stars, Kale's reaction was still extremely fast. However, just as he turned around and reached out his hand toward Jane at lightning speed, Jane was still teleported away by the spatial fog, causing Kale's hands to grab nothing but air. That's the Tesseract? Kale's pupils contracted slightly. Perhaps only the power of the space gem could be so fast that he could not react in time. The space gem was closely guarded on Earth, so it could only be the Tesseract in Loki's hands. Chapter 486. In the dark world, above the ruins of a battlefield. Where did you hide that woman? The dark elf captain, who was still fighting with the vice, saw Jane disappear into thin air and couldn't help but become anxious and shouted at Kale, who was more than 10 meters away. Kale turned his head and stared coldly at the dark elf captain. That chilling gaze made the dark elf captain feel as if he had fallen into an icehouse, and all the following words were stuck in his throat. If Kale was just playing around before, then now he was really a little angry. Loki, that guy, actually abducted Jane, whom Thor entrusted, right in front of him. This anger that was about to erupt in his heart couldn't be vented on Loki, so he could only vent it on the dark elves in front of him. You all deserve to die. Kale whispered softly and suddenly stretched out his right palm. As his 5 fingers clenched hard, a dazzling flame immediately ignited between his fingers, and the dual star energy wrapped around his entire right arm. Kale, who constantly practiced controlling the dual star form, could already accurately control the power in a part without changing the whole body and extract enough dual star energy. That is, standing 100 meters away, Mox, who had not made a move, saw the change in Kale's right arm. His pupils suddenly shrank and a storm was set off in his heart. It was too similar, it was like a powerful increase in the energy of the Infinity Stone. Mox also used ether particles 1,000 years ago, so he knew very well how exaggerated the increase in the power of the Infinity Stone was. It was just that the power used by the human man in front of him didn't seem to be borrowed from the Infinity Stone, but it was a derivative power that completely belonged to him. How is this possible? Mox found it hard to believe that a human could have the same power as the Infinity Stone. Dangerous, that human is very dangerous, his aura has completely changed. The dark elves close to Kale could more intuitively feel the terrifying destructive aura overflowing from Kale's right hand. The target is gone, retreat first, retreat. The dark elf captain made a prompt decision and immediately issued a retreat order, but he was still a step too late. Since you're here, don't leave. Kale opened his right fist once more, forming the shape of a spear with his index and middle fingers forming the shape of a sword as he swiftly aimed at the dark elf captain. The energy of the 2 stars began to circulate and condense. When the energy gathered at the tip of the 2 fingers, it began to emit an extremely dazzling starlight. Whoosh! Kale's right hand trembled slightly as he shot out a laser beam from 2 fingers. This laser beam condensed from the energy of 2 stars was even faster than an ordinary laser beam. It crossed a distance of 20 to 30 meters in an instant and pierced through the back of the dark elf captain's head. The dark elf captain's body stiffened, and before he could even react, his entire head evaporated into a mass of air, turning him into a headless corpse that fell to the sand. And this was just the beginning. Kale's golden eyes were cold and indifferent. His right hand continued to swing, aiming at the dark elves. Beams of dazzling laser beams shot out from his 2 fingers, reaping the lives of the living like the scythe of the Grim Reaper. But after a while, not a single person was spared. The remains of nearly 30 dark elves were strewn all over the battlefield. Those whose heads were not exploded still had expressions of fear and despair on their faces. When there was a huge disparity in strength, it would often result in a one-sided slaughter like this. It was like an elephant stomping down on an ant. The game should be over, right? Kale stepped forward and walked towards the pale Mox. Mox could not help but take a step back. At this moment, he seemed to have heard something and inexplicably turned his body to the side. A mass of spatial fog exploded in the air there. At the same time, a small mass of murky red mist flowed out of the spatial fog and drilled into Mox's body through his pores. Whoosh! A dazzling laser beam came from afar, crossing 100 meters in a straight line and piercing through Mox's left shoulder. It then entered the red mist and extended into the spatial fog. A painful groan came from within the spatial fog, and the spatial fog quickly dissipated in the air. Countless light years away on a planet in the universe. Ah! The scream startled countless birds in the forest. Loki knelt on the ground with a pale face. He held the tesseract in his right hand and clenched his left hand into a fist to stop the bleeding. His left hand was pierced and burned, and blood gushed out like a fountain. Serves you right. Not far from the injured Loki, Jane was sitting on a rock and mocking him. Loki gasped and looked at the bloody hole in his left hand. That was close, that was close. My heart was almost pierced. That man is really a monster. He was even faster than the power of the tesseract when he had a warning. But at least he succeeded and sent part of the power of ether to Mox. There's a good show to watch now. Loki revealed a slightly forced evil smile. You're so bad. Jane frowned deeply and looked at Loki with disdain. Loki could not stand it anymore and growled at Jane, "What do you know? I was saving you. If you continued to stay there, even 10 lives would not be enough for you." In the dark world. He still managed to escape? Kale calmly retracted his 2 fingers and looked at Mox. He sensed the familiar destructive energy from him. Ether particles? Ah. Yes, it's this power. After so many years it still came back. With blood in his eyes, Mox laughed wildly and spread out his hands. The red energy was looming inside and outside his body. The enhancement was on his already strong elf body, and the violent aura made the surrounding sand and dust raged. They were both using the power of the Tesseract. Who was afraid of who? Now Mox not only had his strength increased, but also his confidence. He dared to fight Kale head-on. "If you want to challenge my master, you'll have to get through me first." Vice roared and accelerated forward. With the power of the engine on its back, it was like a battleship crashing into Mox. Just in time. Mox was still laughing wildly. He moved his feet, and a powerful explosion erupted behind him. He disappeared from the spot. So fast. Vice was shocked. He looked around and could not see Mox. However, Mox teleported in front of him and slammed his palm on the outer shell of the Vice chest. Under the impact that contained the power of ether, even steel was shattered. Vice's huge mechanical body was split into 4 or 5 pieces, and countless parts fell to the ground with clanking sounds. Mox did not stop. He continued to fly toward Kale, who was on the hill, and raised a cloud of sand and dust. He threw out a punch imbued with ether power, but it was blocked by a palm that was lit up with light flames. Ether and space, the collision of the 2 gem-like energies, was like the violent reaction of sodium and water. Boom! The energy wave swept across the 2 sides, raising a cloud of sand and dust. Thor and the cursed warriors who were still in the middle of the battle, were sent flying. "If you want to fight, I'll grant you your wish." In the energy tide, Kair's silver hair fluttered as he slowly opened his eyes. He grabbed Malak Kaiser's fist, and his entire body ignited with sacred and powerful flames. Dual star form. Chapter 487. At this moment, on Earth, which was far away from the dark world and the human world. London. In the bustling downtown area, it was still 12 o'clock in the morning, but the sky was covered with dark clouds. It was dark and heavy, and there were signs of a typhoon or a thunderstorm. Most of the citizens on the street saw that something was wrong with the sky and began to hide in their houses. Only a group of people with scientific instruments walked out against the crowd. It was Jane's astronomical research team. Daisy, Jane's new assistant, and an old scientist with a balding head, Dr. Eric. "Hurry up. You two, hurry up and bring the instruments and follow me." Eric kept waving his hand behind him as he anxiously walked in front. Behind him, Daisy and her new assistant carried a scientific instrument that looked like a receiver and followed closely behind. When the 3 of them walked out of the square outside, a flock of white pigeons flew over their heads and suddenly circled at a low altitude. In the fierce wind, at the moment when the flock of white pigeons was about to hit the building, circles of ripples appeared in the air, and the white pigeons disappeared into the ripples. And the next moment, the flock of white pigeons inexplicably appeared in the air 100 meters away. "Professor Eric, did you see that just now?" Daisy looked at the flock of white pigeons in the sky, as if she had seen a ghost. "I saw it. That is what I have been searching for in the past few years." Eric took a deep breath and looked up at the sky above the dark clouds. His face was solemn. "It is said that every 1,000 years, there will be a convergence of celestial bodies. At that time, different worlds will be connected, and the borders will become blurred." The new assistant looked at Eric dumbfounded and couldn't help but ask, "Professor, aren't you a scientist? Why do you believe in myths and legends?" Before Eric answered, Daisy sighed and said helplessly, "If you see Thor flying in the sky with your own eyes, the hammer that summons thunder and all kinds of magic, you will also believe in myths and legends." Daisy paused and continued to ask, "Then, Professor Eric, when will the convergence of celestial bodies officially begin?" "No, not when." Eric shook his head. Looking at the tiny hole that was gradually breaking open in the sky, he said with certainty, "Right now, the celestial bodies are already gathering." In the world of darkness, the battlefield was at a low altitude. One of the light spots was like an extremely dazzling comet, and the other strange red light spot collided with each other at an astonishing speed that generated sonic booms. Then both of them were sent flying backwards. At the center of the collision, the two gems' energies violently collided and exploded, causing waves of energy tides and explosive waves to sweep outwards. Thor, and the cursed warriors were also affected. They were constantly eating sand. In the harsh environment, the two of them clung onto each other and wrestled fiercely. Just as they were rolling down the sand slope, a ripple swept past them. Thor and the cursed warrior vanished into thin air from the original battlefield at the same time. Low in the sky, Kale did not notice the situation of Thor and the cursed warrior. His whole body was burning with the energy of the two stars. Under the dazzling and scorching light, he was like a superhuman constructed of energy. His body had its own engine brake. He forcibly stopped the aftermath of the impact and came to a stop in the air. Mox was not to be outdone. He fell to the ground and his whole body was surrounded by strong ether energy, setting off a black sandstorm. He quickly stood up, seemingly unharmed. Mox looked at Kale ferociously. He suddenly stomped on the ground and the whole hill collapsed with a rumble. He shot into the sky again like a cannonball. The reality gem was an existence that distorted reality and fantasy. Therefore, in terms of physical strength enhancement, the ether energy was slightly higher than the spatial energy. Of course, the speed enhancement of spatial energy was far from what the ether energy could compare to. The 6 infinity gems each had their own characteristics. Not bad. The warm-up is officially over. Next is the real battle. Looking at Mox flying towards him, the corners of Kale's mouth curled up slightly. He clenched his fists tightly. As soon as his hands were ready to punch, he turned into a dazzling stream of light and swooped down. With a speed close to the speed of light, the distance of a few hundred meters was covered in an instant. Kale's fists landed on Mox's chest, pushing him down and crashing into the sand below. The moment before they hit the ground, with a ripple, Kale and Mox disappeared together. The world of darkness, which was originally a scene of intense battle, suddenly became extremely silent. Only the wind and sand continued to howl and wreak havoc. Rustle. Under a pile of broken steel parts in the sand, a small mechanical arm stretched out. Then the intelligent creature Vice crawled out from below. Vice climbed up the steel parts and looked at the area where there was no one. Even its intelligent mind was a little confused. Vice mumbled to herself, "Where is everyone? Master, Thor, and the enemy? Where did they go?" Earth, London. Eric and the other two were still following the detection device in the square when a bolt of lightning struck down from the sky. Then, a strong blonde man in silver armor and a humanoid monster in bone armor hugged each other and rolled down from the sky. They fell straight into the fountain in the square, splashing water everywhere. Many people nearby were frightened and screamed. "Professor, look, it's Thor." Daisy recognized one of them and shouted in shock. The new assistant was shocked and said, "Where did they fall from? Don't tell me it's the divine realm?" Eric operated the device and said seriously, "Not just them, there's more. There's an even more powerful energy flow approaching." As soon as he finished speaking, Kale pressed his fists against Mox's chest and suddenly appeared in the sky above the square. He crashed into the museum like a red-hot meteorite. Half of the seemingly sturdy building was turned into ruins. Many people screamed and fled in all directions. The graveyard of battleships in the dark world and the city of London in the human world were almost seamlessly connected. Therefore the battle continued. Saul waved Thor's hammer and sent the cursed warrior flying. His red cloak fluttered in the wind. Just as he was about to hit the cursed warrior again, he disappeared into thin air in the next moment, leaving Thor's hammer in a daze on the fountain. Have I returned to Earth? Kale looked at the familiar streets and people around him and was a little confused. He suddenly had a flash of inspiration as he recalled what Odin had said about the convergence of celestial bodies. The 9 realms of Marvel were connected in this short period of time. Before Kale could think more, Mox, who was blasted into the hole in the ground, jumped up aggressively with a storm of gravel and dust. Kale's eyes were cold. He condensed energy and strength in his hands and continued to collide head-on with Mox. In just a few seconds, the houses in the center of London collapsed one after another. The area within 100 meters was repeatedly ravaged by the aftermath of the battle. Eric and the other two were in a mess in the wind. They looked at the doomsday scene that was better than special effects. What was a fight between gods? This was a real fight between gods. Chapter 488. New York, Stark Industries headquarters, inside the chairman's office. Tony Stark, dressed in casual clothes, was lying comfortably on the reception sofa. He seemed to be resting with his eyes closed, but his eyes were slightly open as he peeked in the direction of the office chair. Little Pepper Boz was wearing a white suit. Boz buried her head in her work, signing documents skillfully. Without raising her head, she said lightly, "Tani, don't look at me with those lustful eyes. It's working hours now and we're still in the office." Ahem. Now that I think about it, it's even more exciting. Tani coughed a few times and asked in surprise, "How did you know I was looking at you? So, you were really looking at me with those lustful eyes just now?" Boz looked up and rolled her eyes at him. "Why didn't you take Peter out to play recently?" "He's preparing to go to high school and I don't have much free time recently." Tani snorted and rolled his eyes, his thoughts drifting away. Boz didn't deny this. Ever since Tani's fight with Godfather a few days ago, he had been thinking about something in his exclusive studio. Beep, beep, beep. At this moment Tani's cell phone suddenly rang. Jarvis said, "Sir, it's a call from Little Spider Peter." "What does that kid want now?" Although Tani said so, he still let Jarvis answer the call. As soon as the phone was connected, Peter's anxious voice came through. "Mr. Stark, are you watching TV?" "TV? What TV?" Tani was stunned. Peter continued, "Turn on the TV now and switch to any news channel." "You kid?" Tani frowned slightly and ordered Jarvis, "Jarvis, turn on the TV in the office and switch to any news channel." "Yes, sir." As soon as Jarvis's voice fell, the embedded LCD screen on one side of the office wall turned on. On the New York News Channel, the female anchor sat in front of the stage with a serious face and spoke in fluent English. "Our TV station just received an urgent news. Just 5 minutes ago, the local people in London's Natural History Exhibition Square were involved in a disastrous battle. It's suspected that the figure of the symbol of peace, Thor and other superheroes have appeared." "Godfather and Thor?" Tani squinted his eyes slightly. He was half lying on the sofa, but he had already sat up straight and walked a few steps forward to get closer to the LCD screen. "Now we'll have a live broadcast." After the female host finished speaking, she switched the video to the local reporter. The scene changed. The male reporter was standing by the side of the square, holding the microphone in horror. The background was the ruins of the street that was still billowing with smoke and fire. Everywhere, pedestrians were screaming and fleeing. The male reporter reported in a fluster, "Dear audience, I'm a reporter from London. I'm now standing next to London's Central Square. You can clearly see that 5 minutes ago, the streets of London were still peaceful and bustling. But now, 5 minutes later, they've become a tragic ruin. According to my visual estimation, the symbol of peace and Thor are each fighting fiercely with an alien enemy. It's just that their whereabouts are erratic. Half a minute ago they were still fighting here. Suddenly they've all disappeared." Before the male reporter could finish his words, a small silver hammer flew past him at high speed. Then, the cursed warrior and Thor appeared about 10 meters away at the same time. They fell and rolled on the asphalt road, creating a pothole. The two were just fighting with their fists and feet, but they were like space beasts. They easily knocked over many parked cars on the road. The camera finally stopped at the male reporter's terrified face. He was trying to avoid a car that was caught in the wind. The scene then blurred and the camera quickly turned back to the anchor. The anchor patted her chest and said in shock, "The signal of the London reporter has been cut off from the TV station. I hope they're okay. I also hope that London can be like New York half a year ago, getting through this crisis without any mishap." "Enough." Tani gestured with his left hand. Jarvis understood what he meant and turned off the TV screen. "Tani, did Godfather and the rest run into some trouble again?" Boz looked at Tani with slight worry. "I'm not sure yet. But even Godfather couldn't solve it in time. This shows that the enemy this time is very tricky." Tani said this and lowered his head slightly. Only then did he realize that he hadn't hung up the call. Peter's voice came from the phone. "Mr. Stark, do you need me to go over and help? You'd better stay in New York. School is about to start. Don't run around. Otherwise I'll complain to Aunt May." Tani hung up the phone directly. After thinking about it, he said to Boz in a deep voice, "Sorry, it looks like I can't have dinner with you." Boz didn't dissuade him. She nodded and said, "Be careful. You must pay attention to your safety." "Of course." Tani agreed. As he walked toward the open floor-to-ceiling window in the office, he gave orders to Jarvis. "Jarvis, send over a set of the latest armor. It's urgent." "Yes, sir." What an eventful time. Tani went to the floor-to-ceiling window. A dozen steel parts flew in from outside the window and attached themselves to his body. A few seconds later, the engines on the palms and soles of the feet started up. A golden red painted Iron Man turned into a stream of light and flew toward the sky in the direction of London at supersonic speed. Tani, Boz came to the floor-to-ceiling window. She put her hands on her chest and watched the Iron Man's back until it completely disappeared from her sight. At this time London. In the central square, a ripple gently caressed. Kale, who was burning with the powerful energy of the two stars, rushed out of the void. His feet stepped on the grass and his right hand was still in a fist shape. But Mox, who was the target, was randomly teleported to an unknown place. Here it comes again. Can't you let me finish this battle in peace? Kale also felt a little helpless. The surface of London was fine. As long as it was 10 meters in the air, the space boundary would become blurred. As long as a creature passed through there, it would be randomly teleported to a place in the Nine Lands. In the 5-minute battle just now, Kale and Mox had switched back and forth at least 10 places. That was to say they switched places every half a minute. Here it comes? Kale's mind suddenly moved. He raised his head and looked straight ahead. There was another ripple in the air. This made him clench his right fist in advance. Sure enough, as the ripple caressed, a tall and burly figure emerged from it. Oh? Kale was stunned. He remembered that Mox's figure was not that tall. This burly figure, could it be? The next moment, the cursed warrior in white bone armor leaped out of the air with a low growl. It raised its hands high above its head and was about to trample and hammer down. However, when the cursed warrior saw the figure in front of it clearly and saw the figure emitting flames, it froze in its tracks. This is not right. No, you've chosen the right path, death. Kyle, on the other hand, was smiling brightly. He swiftly threw out a punch with his right fist and punched through the cursed warrior's white bone armor with just one punch. Light waves and air waves were set off, and blood and broken bones were splattered everywhere. Chapter 489. Bang! The cursed warrior arched his body, blood gushing out of his mouth as he flew backward. He crashed into the art sculptures and street lamps in the central square, plowing a 50-meter-long ditch in the road. Finally, his head tilted to one side as he fainted beside the ruined wall. A ripple of space quietly passed by, and the cursed warrior suddenly disappeared from the spot. No one knew where he had been randomly teleported to. Let's get rid of one first. Kale didn't care and calmly withdrew his right fist. To be able to severely injure the elite of the Dark Elves, the cursed warrior, this was all within his expectations. After all, after the battle with Thor just now, the cursed warrior's physical strength was almost exhausted. In addition, the energy of the two stars had been accumulated in advance. No matter who was caught off guard, they would not be able to withstand the energy impact of the Infinity Stone. Wait, where are Mox and Thor? Where did they go? Kale looked up at the sky with a little surprise, and his pupils suddenly shrank in the next moment. It was London's sky that was originally covered with dark clouds. At this time there was a shocking tornado storm. Several strange world holes could be seen in the giant eye of the storm. There were exactly 8 wormholes stacked together like hamburgers. This is the real convergence of celestial bodies. Kale narrowed his eyes solemnly. His inverted golden pupils looked through the holes in the eye of the storm. He could vaguely see the supreme divine realm surrounded by stars, the dark world shrouded in sand and fog, the world of ice and snow, the world of fire, and the world of death without any signs of life, and so on. The territory ruled by the divine realm was divided into 9 realms. Each realm could be regarded as an independent world with a boundary wall. Usually they did not invade or disturb each other. Among them, Earth and the Milky Way Alliance belonged to the human world. They were also the most prosperous and civilized areas of the 9 realms. For thousands of years, the divine realm had been working to maintain the balance of the 9 realms and expel the frost giants, dark elves, and other ancient forces from the human world. It was a pity that the 9 realms must be united after being separated for a long time, and they must be separated after being united for a long time. Thinking about this, Kale got a very bad news from the speed of the celestial body's convergence. The realm of the gods' influence on the 9 realms was weakening, and the strength of the realm of the gods was ultimately traced back to Odin's origin. Father of the gods, Odin, is dying? Kale whispered to himself. Suddenly, a thunderbolt struck down from the sky. The thunderbolt split the sky into 2 with a deafening rumble. Just by saying this sentence, the heavens and earth seemed to tremble. On the other side, in the dark world, Thor suddenly appeared in midair and fell to the bottom of the sand dune, rolling down the slope. He opened his right hand and kept summoning Thor's hammer. However, the hammer of Thor, which was still in London on Earth, needed a certain amount of time to travel from one world to another. Thor rolled all the way to the bottom of the hill before he finally stopped. He spat out the sand in his mouth as he looked around, trying to find the cursed warrior. A ripple came from the side. Then a figure appeared from within. Sharp horns, white bone armor, and a burly figure. Who else could it be but the cursed warrior? Saul widened his eyes and clenched his fists. Just as he was about to fight, he saw the cursed warrior turn over and lie on the sand 5 meters away with his arms and legs spread out. He had no consciousness at all. Playing dead. Thor raised his eyebrows in confusion. He took a step forward and saw that the cursed warrior's mouth and nose were bubbling with blood. The tough white bone armor on his upper body was full of cracks, and his chest was severely caved in. There was a medium-sized fist print in the middle. Seeing this scene, Saul's doubt turned into a bitter smile. There were probably not many people in the 9 realms who could beat an opponent that he couldn't defeat even after fighting for dozens of rounds in just a few seconds into such a seriously injured and half-crippled state. "Kale, how did you defeat my opponent?" Thor scratched his head in frustration. Just then, in the air above the hill in front of him, a figure fell from the ripple and landed on the top of the sand dune with a loud boom, instantly stirring up a sky full of gravel and dust. Thor quickly covered his mouth and nose. After the dust swept past, he looked at the hill again. He saw Mox standing on the top of the hill, surrounded by ether energy, looking down at him with a cold gaze. "All right, my opponent is you, Mox." Thor seemed to have been enlightened. He allowed the anger to wreak havoc in his chest. His right hand suddenly swung back. Just as he opened his 5 fingers, the Thor hammer, which had traveled a long distance, finally flew back into his hand from afar. The surface of the hammer was still slightly hot. "What a joke. How can you defeat me in my current state?" Mox sneered and raised his hands. The red mist stirred up the sand and formed an energy storm around him. "What? Because I can pick up this hammer. Because I have thunder and lightning flowing in my body." Thor's electric eyes were threatening. He took a firm step forward. Under the tight grip of the Thor hammer, the sizzling thunder and lightning wrapped around his body and the hammer, making him hammer. "No, man and lightning become one. Today only one of us can leave here alive," Thor said domineeringly, his red cloak fluttering in the wind. He was like a supreme king. London Central Square, which was in a mess. Before Kale could wait for Mox to teleport back, the sound of an engine came from the sky behind him. He looked back and saw a familiar Iron Man flying towards him at supersonic speed, leaving a trail of air behind him. Finally he landed beside him with a clang. Kale looked at him and smiled. "Tawny, Godfather." The Iron Man took off his iron mask, revealing Tawny's bearded face. He looked around and asked in disbelief, "What is going on? I just flew into the sky outside London, then somehow appeared in the London subway. When I came out of the subway, I was teleported near the Tower of London. After going through several places, I finally arrived here. It's a long story. But you're lucky that you weren't teleported to another world." Kale shrugged and gestured above his head. When Tawny looked up and saw the strange scene of celestial bodies converging, he couldn't help but gasp. "That hole? It couldn't have been made by Loki again, right?" Tawny immediately thought of Loki. Kale shook his head. "No. The 9 worlds. Even the Tesseract in his hands can't connect the 9 worlds together." Tawny pondered. "Then how can we block it?" "There's only one way for now. Wait for it to disappear." Kale's reply was very straightforward. The convergence of celestial bodies was like a lunar eclipse. It was a mysterious scene formed by the laws of nature and wouldn't last for long. "So, we're just going to wait here?" Tawny kept looking at the spatial hole, but suddenly he saw a mechanical spaceship that looked like a donut breaking into London from one of the worlds. Tawny thought that he was seeing things at first, but after blinking his eyes, he was sure that the thing in front of him wasn't an illusion. Tawny looked at the interstellar spaceship emerging from the bottom of the hole. His face instantly turned pale and he said with a trembling voice, "Godfather, it can't be wrong. It's this type of spaceship. It's the same alien force that attacked us last time and took away Gola and Lorna." Chapter 490. Without needing Tawny to specifically explain, Kale had already recognized it. This donut-shaped large spaceship was undoubtedly the standard alien battleship of the Thanos army. It was a subordinate of the alien organization that belonged to Thanos. Because of Lorna's abduction, Kale had yet to settle the score with Thanos. Who would have thought that its people would send themselves to their doorstep, brazenly entering Earth's home field? It was unknown whether the Thanos army was too confident or too stupid. The interstellar spaceship descended straight from the space hole where the celestial bodies converged. The huge wind turbine in the middle, which was the main engine inside and outside the spaceship, constantly pulled and shattered the surrounding high-altitude clouds and began to absorb the surface oxygen of London, causing a fierce wind to blow on the streets below. Trash such as plastic bags and paper were the first to fly into the sky. The pedestrians who saw the alien spaceship could not help but scream and flee in horror. A large number of abandoned cars blocked the road. Tani looked at the large spaceship that was getting closer and closer, and the strong wind that blew his hair up, and reminded him seriously, "Godfather, I know you're very angry now, but you'd better not make a move first. If you accidentally destroy the alien spaceship, London's central city will be completely gone." There were pros and cons in a home field battle. The pros were naturally that reinforcements would arrive at any time, and they would be familiar with the environment. The cons were that when fighting, they would be afraid of accidentally injuring their fellow humans, and they would not be able to fight completely without restraint. Kale nodded in agreement and said indifferently, "Of course I know this. If not for the fact that this is central London and the space ripples caused by the convergence of celestial bodies everywhere, how could they still be flying above my head safely?" In front of the double star form, any spaceship or battleship of the civilization's technological level was just a pile of scrap metal like a target. In terms of speed, spaceships and battleships could reach the speed of light, which was already considered the pinnacle of technology, but the double star form could break through to the speed of light. In terms of energy, spaceships and battleships were at most at the sun level, but the double star form derived from infinity stones could easily reach the universe level. The double star form seemed to be a supernatural power that existed above technological civilization. Tani nervously took a deep breath and muttered to himself, "Let me think of a way. Is there any way to avoid being forcefully teleported away, and at the same time, stop the enemies on the interstellar spaceship?" Hearing Tani's words, Kale's heart skipped a beat. That's right, he did have such a method, but unfortunately he lost it a long time ago. He needed a key that could open it. Just as Kale was thinking about this, there was a strange sound not far behind him. He and Tani looked back and saw sparks on the surface of the ground spinning into a wheel. A circular portal was being constructed at a speed visible to the naked eye. First, a foot stepped out of the portal. Then, a fat white man in a brown robe with a beard came to the central square from the other side of the portal with a short staff in his hand. "Who are you?" Tani asked in surprise. "Just add me as King." King replied to Tani, then looked at Kale and said seriously, "Mr. Kale, Mage Supremacy asked me to come. I almost forgot about your existence." Kale pointed to the alien spaceship that was pressing down behind them and said coldly, "This is definitely an invasion, right? So, Alpha Centauri is preparing to participate in the battle this time?" "No." King shook his head and said, "Mage Supremacy has more important things to do, and she said that you can completely deal with this crisis." "What is this?" Kale's eyes turned cold and looked at King with disdain. "Then what are you doing here? To cheer us on? Isn't Alpha Centauri, the Earth's guardian, too casual? Mage Supremacy has something for me to pass on to you." King did not procrastinate and directly took out a small box from his pocket. After handing it to Kale, he turned and walked towards the portal that was still spinning on Mars, as if he had no reason to stay. King's footsteps paused and finally left a sentence. "Mage Supremacy also asked me to pass on a message to you at the same time. She said that Stephen Strange is already a member of our holy sanctum, and she hopes that you will not interfere too much. The item in that box will be the proof of our holy sanctum's friendship." As soon as he finished speaking, King stepped through the circular portal and disappeared from the square along with the sparks. After King left, Tani asked Kale, "Godfather, who was the person called King just now? And, you were talking about Mage and the holy sanctum just now?" Kale did not speak, his eyes drifted, then he said softly, "Tani, you will know in the near future that Earth is not as simple as you think, and there are many extraordinary forces that have yet to surface." "Then I'll look forward to it." Tani nodded, looked at the small box in Kale's hand and asked with interest, "Then what did he bring?" "You'll know when you open it." Kale smiled indifferently and gently blew at the box in his palm. The perfect control of the divine flame burned the outer box to ashes, and the ashes were blown out of the palm, revealing a strange black ring inside. It was strange mainly because rings were usually worn on one finger, but the palm in front of him was suitable for 2 fingers. Kale, who had always been calm and steady, could not help but tremble slightly when he saw the strange ring on his hand, and his shoulders trembled slightly with excitement. The ring that King sent on behalf of mage supremacy was not a divine artifact, but it was better than one. It was also the exclusive key that Kale had been missing. Godfather. They're coming down, we have to do something. Tani at the side said solemnly. Kale looked forward and saw that the donut spaceship had descended to 100 meters, and the strong braking force and wind pressure could almost suck people away. Because of this, you got someone to send this to me? Kale thought and understood the intention of the Ancient One, although this could not change his bad impression of Alpha Centauri as a shopkeeper. Since this is what you want to see, I'll do as you wish as long as you don't regret it in the future. Kale murmured in a low voice, and put the strange ring on 2 fingers of his left hand. The moment he put the ring on, Kale felt a familiar power from the outside world flowing into his body through the resonance of his soul. At the same time, in Kale's body, the ability cards that had been dim for many years finally regained their usable light. Portal, Mirror Dimension, Magical Whip, Defense Mantra, Hanging Ring. It's been a long time, it's really been a long time. Kale sighed with emotion. Since a few decades ago when he traveled from Earth to Casa, he lost the hanging ring that he took from a mage. It was only today that he put on the hanging ring again, and the ability cards that could not be used in the card dimension were lit up. Just nice, I'll use you guys to test my skills. Kale looked at the spaceship that occupied his entire field of vision, and suddenly opened his hands in front of him. The hanging ring, magical power, and ability cards all worked together to cast a spell. Chapter 491. Boom, boom, boom. The donut-shaped spaceship landed in the city of London. The bottom of the spaceship instantly crushed several high-rise buildings. The windmill engine stirred up the air and turbulence on the streets, crushing everything that was sucked in, including stones, into dust. It was like a giant lawnmower was trying its best to destroy civilization. Virum. A blue circular beam of light shot out from the spaceship and landed on the street in front of the spaceship. 2 figures, a man and a woman, faintly appeared from it. It was not until the light dimmed and disappeared that their appearance was fully revealed. The man was tall and strong, wearing a black cloak and holding a scythe on his shoulder. The skin on his ugly face was frighteningly pale. The woman was slim and tall. Under a set of tight metal armor, the curves of her body were even more beautiful. However, she was holding a black spear in her right hand. Her skin color was similar to the man's, as if she belonged to the same alien race as the man. She looked like she did not have any sexual desire. No other alien troops appeared. Only the 2 of them stood on the street, exuding an extremely oppressive aura. The female alien, dark Proxima neighbor, walked gracefully and lightly. Her tone was frighteningly cold as she grinned hideously. Don't tell me that every time we come here, we have to slaughter all the creatures in the entire civilized city and let them know how powerful we are? Master won't be happy about meaningless killings. Also, something is not right here. The undead general's sunken eyes looked around in surprise. The streets, buildings, abandoned vehicles, and so on, everything was real and not an illusion. However, he could not see a single person at a glance. The entire central city? No, the entire city was devoid of any signs of life. Only the humming sound of their own spaceships braking could be heard. Not far from the donut-shaped spaceship, on the rooftop of a skyscraper. A drop of sweat slid down his forehead. Kale took a long breath. He maintained the posture of spreading his hands. The dazzling light on the hanging ring disappeared one by one. Obviously, the spell had been cast successfully. Godfather, what have you done? Tani, wearing an Iron Man armor, opened his mouth wide and stood on the edge of the handrail on the roof, looking down at the large spaceship hanging in front of him and the alien man and woman below. The streets and buildings were still the same, but the people were all gone. It was as if all the living creatures had evaporated into thin air and no longer existed in this world. Looking up, Tani was shocked to discover that even the spectacle created by the convergence of celestial bodies had disappeared. This isn't our original world. It's like the back of a mirror. It's just a parallel mirror world that's been replicated. Kale explained. He waved his hand in the air, and a reflection of the glass appeared. Through the glass he could see the original world. The streets of London were still in a state of chaos, with people screaming and fleeing in the jammed highways. Kale put down his hands and said tiredly, I pulled you, me, and the alien spaceship into the mirror dimension. It was very difficult to do that. However, there are no celestial bodies here and there are no concerns for the safety of humans. You can fight as you please. Is that so? That's great. Surprised by the existence of the mirror dimension, Tani also put on his Iron Man mask and prepared for the upcoming battle. Tani, were they the ones who attacked you last time? Kale pointed down at the undead general and Alpha Centauri standing on the street. Tani shook his head and said firmly, "No, it was the other two who led the team. One of them can control any item and happens to restrain Lorna's ability. He's very difficult to deal with. The other one has a physique and strength that's not inferior to Hulk's. He's holding a giant axe and can casually split an entire building. Whether it's them or not, they're still from the same faction. Tani, let's go. Let's go down and meet them." Kyle's eyes glinted coldly. He didn't think too much about it. With a light leap, his body fell several hundred meters from the rooftop. "Yes," Tani answered. He turned on the engine in his hand and followed closely behind Kale, diving down the street. "They're here. Someone is indeed up to no good." The undead general seemed to have sensed something. He immediately looked up and saw Kale and Tani descending from the sky. "Whoever dares to block our way, no matter who it is, just kill them." Alpha Centauri raised his chin proudly, not taking the humans on Earth seriously at all. Thanos' forces were top-notch even in the Milky Way Alliance, not to mention in a barren place like Earth. Tap, tap. Clang. Kale and Tani used the traction and engine respectively to slow down the speed of their fall. They landed on the ground 10 meters away from each other, stirring up a white wave of dust. "There are also strange people on Earth?" The undead general looked at Kale and Tani with a gloomy expression. His eyes fell on Tani first. After all, Tani's Iron Man armor was a top-notch product no matter how one looked at it. "If you know what's good for you, hand over the ether particles. We have followed you from the dark world all the way here." Alpha Centauri said to Kale in a commanding tone, not hiding his intention to come to Earth. "Oh, so that's how it is." Kale's eyes showed a look of realization. He finally understood why Thanos' forces suddenly came to Earth. They were not here for Earth but for the ether. After coming to the dark world, they were sent to London by the space flow gathered by the celestial bodies. Tani simply spread out his hands and said coldly, "Sorry. Earth is closed today. We don't welcome strange aliens like you. You'd better sit on that, sweetie, and go home early for dinner. Is there no room for discussion?" Alpha Centauri's face was gloomy. He clenched the dark spear in his hand. The tip of the spear flashed with faint purple energy. He was ready to attack, but he was stopped by Deathblade next to him. "Alpha Centauri, wait a minute." Deathblade's eyes moved away from Tani and focused on Kale. His pupils slightly focused. "The silver-haired, golden-eyed human from Earth. Don't you think he looks familiar? I seem to have seen him somewhere." Isn't he just a human?" Alpha Centauri looked at Kale casually, but he was suddenly stunned. He looked at him again and said in surprise, "No way, such a coincidence? He can't be the human man that Master reminded us to be careful many times, and the one who caused waves in the Milky Way Alliance, right?" "It should be." Deathblade took a deep breath and took a heavy step forward. He said to Kale, "You have something in your hands that was taken from Luonan, something that originally belonged to us. Are you talking about this?" Kale opened his left hand casually. A card was pulled out and manifested into a purple gem lying peacefully on his palm. The power gem. The eyes of the Deathblade warrior and Proxima Archangel became fervent. "If you want it, then come and get it. If you can get it, I'll give it to you." Kale smiled. Chapter 492. I'll give it to you. Do you dare to come and take it? Kale's calm yet domineering voice resounded subtly within London's mirror world. It reached the ears of Proxima Centauri and the Deathblade warrior, making them feel incomparably ear-piercing. Proxima Centauri narrowed his eyes. His brown pupils reflected Kale and flickered with an extremely dangerous light. He turned his head and spoke to the Deathblade warrior in a low voice, "Be careful. That human man killed Luonan." A human had killed the leader of Kree Luonan. This matter not only shocked the entire Milky Way Alliance, it even spread far and wide in the universe beyond the Milky Way. Luonan, that trash, dared to disobey Master. It's normal for him to be killed. Don't worry. I'll cut off his hand and take the raw power gem. Then I'll cut off his head and give it to Master. The Deathblade warrior snorted coldly. He never put Luonan in his eyes. He lifted his 2-meter-long scythe with one hand and walked towards Kale with a cold and oppressive aura. His slender tongue flicked out like a snake's tongue. The Deathblade warrior spoke coldly to Kale with an undisguised killing intent. "I definitely won't be like Luonan. I'll arrogantly treat you as a weakling. I'll use all my strength and turn you into a soul under my blade. Remember my name, General Deathblade. This is the name of the person who will kill you." You talk too much nonsense. Also, I never remember the names of dead people. Kale was completely unmoved. He turned the power gem into a card and placed it back into the card space. The powerful aura that rose from his opponent's body could absolutely be ranked in the top 3 of all the enemies he had encountered. He was definitely several times stronger than Luonan, but there was no need for him to use one of his trump cards, the power gem, just to be stronger than Luonan. If the dead Luonan knew that there were people who used him as a unit of combat strength, he probably wouldn't be able to rest in peace even if he died. Tani, there's no need to pick. Just take one each. Let's end this quickly. We can still fight to go home for dinner. Kale leaned to the side and spoke to Tani, who stood to the side. No problem. Leave the other one to me. Tani nodded and looked at the Proxima Noctis beside the Death Blade. Of course, he knew that the Death Blade was the strongest of the two, so Kale had targeted it from the start. Godfather was always like this. He would either fight one against many, or choose the strongest enemy to deal with. I am Iron Man. If I lose again, I will never be able to wash away the shame on me. Tani was still brooding over the fact that he had not been able to defeat the other 2 Thanos soldiers the last time and had even allowed his companion to be taken away. You want to be my opponent? Alpha Centauri smiled and licked his dry lips. My name is Alpha Centauri Dark Knight. Please give me some advice. Whoosh, before he could finish the word teach. Proxima Nigra suddenly moved, and a white wave of air broke out behind his tail, and in the blink of an eye, he crossed a distance of more than 10 meters. Dark Proxima Centauri came in front of Tony, who was wearing the Iron Man armor. She lowered her body slightly, like a female cheetah baring its fangs, and stabbed the black spear in her hands into his chest at the same time. What an amazing speed. Kale's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise as he saw the other party's intention and actions clearly, but even so, he still did not choose to do it. That was the enemy of Tani. If he always needed to intervene and he couldn't defeat the powerful villain, then Tani would not be an Iron Man with a mortal body. At the critical moment when the spear fell and pierced his chest, Tani couldn't see the other party's inhuman fast movements through the human eye in time, but with the assistance of Jarvis's intelligent artificial system and the Iron Man armor's own emergency protection, he still raised his left hand in a hurry to block. Chi. Proxima Nigra's spear stabbed Tani's steel left hand, and with a series of sparks and electric flashes, the steel shell, which is known for its high protective ability and can easily block the impact of high-explosive bombs and penetrating warheads, was directly pierced by the cold weapon spear, and it almost penetrated Tani's fragile human arm. Even so, Tani still suffered a lot of hidden losses, and the broken steel left arm was wrapped in electric light, and it was in a scrap state after one blow. Jarvis quickly and anxiously issued an alarm. Sir, the armor on the left hand is all paralyzed, and the spear has very strange energy that can instantly destroy the performance of electronic technology equipment. I see. Tani quickly stretched out his right hand, and like an iron clamp, his 5 fingers tightly clasped the spear, and the engine assisted his arm, so that the spear tip could no longer penetrate into the shell. Almost. Next time, it will pierce your heart hidden in the steel. Proxima Nigra sneered again and continued to rush forward, pushing Tani backward at high speed. The two crashed into the first floor of the building together, breaking through several reinforced concrete walls and glass windows in succession, disappearing into the other side of the street behind the building, and dust filled the air. After the two left, only Kale and Deathblade were left in the same place. Can you not help? Your companion is going to be killed by Proxima Nigra. Deathblade said coldly. Kale shook his head gently and said firmly, There is no need for that, he will kill Proxima Nigra, and I will kill you. Is that so? General Deathblade was non-committal. He stepped lightly, raised the scythe in his hand above his head, and rushed in a straight line towards Kale's head at a speed far beyond Proxima Nigra's. There were no other fancy attacking methods, only direct and efficient movements. However, under the superhuman speed of supersonic speed and the indescribable pure power of the slash, the air within a radius of dozens of meters exploded chaotically, forming a turbulent gale with the movements of General Deathblade. Kale could clearly feel that his body was facing the incoming slash. All the hair on his body stood up, as if there was a sharp edge scraping against his skin, and alarm bells rang loudly in his heart. If he was completely hit in a vital point, he might really die. Kale's heart trembled slightly, but this long-lost sense of threat did not make him feel fear or tremble. Instead, it made the blood in his body boil slightly, and his heart burned with the desire to fight. That's right, it was the desire to fight. When facing Mox, who was supported by ether particles, he was only slightly serious, but now General Deathblade ignited his burning desire to fight. The corners of Kale's mouth curled up slightly, and he stepped forward with his left foot. As his heavy footsteps landed, with his body as the center, the natural gravitational force around him suddenly increased by several times. Repulsive traction. General Deathblade was in the air, and his expression changed slightly. Due to the sudden repulsive force, his originally smooth movements inevitably became sluggish, and he did not completely close in on Kale, but he still slashed down with the scythe raised above his head. The grayish-black scythe slashed down from above, forming a crescent moon trajectory, and rushed towards Kale's forehead with the sound of wind breaking. Immediately after, it was blocked by a magic shield. The collision between the blade and the scythe and the golden shield caused countless scorching sparks to fly everywhere. The battle had officially begun. Chapter 493. Under the defense of the golden wheel that appeared on Kale's left hand, the General Deathblade's first attack failed. It was about to attack again, but Kale obviously didn't give it the chance. He waved his empty right hand forward, and a golden whip wrapped around its wrist. Go! Kale roared and used the unparalleled divine power of the god bloodline. With nearly 100 times the strength of a human, he pulled the golden whip back and threw the General Deathblade toward the commercial building behind him. Because of Tani and the Proxima Centauri, the first floor of the commercial building had been completely penetrated. Now that the General Deathblade had hit it like a human cannonball, it suddenly collapsed. The entire London mirror dimension shook at this moment. The General Deathblade was buried in the collapsed bricks and concrete. Its figure disappeared in a cloud of dust. The General Deathblade's gray scythe spun a few times in the air and inserted itself between Kale and the ruins of the building. The blade was slanted into the ground, and the body of the scythe was still trembling. Under the sunlight of the mirror dimension, the blade of the scythe reflected a dark metallic luster. Even the weapon has fallen out of its hand? Kale raised his eyebrows slightly. This was a little beyond his expectations. He had just met an opponent who had the will to fight, but in just a few moves, the opponent had even lost its weapon? He didn't think too much about it. He just followed his curiosity and hobby of collecting weapons. Kale stepped forward and reached for the handle of the scythe. It was cold to the touch, but the mysterious power hidden in the blade suddenly burst out and tried to invade his body along the handle and arm. Kale's expression changed slightly. Even with his god body, his arm was almost frozen. His bodily functions were about to be paralyzed. He quickly activated the power of the fire god. His golden eyes lit up with fire. The golden flames burned from inside to outside, destroying the cold energy that had invaded his body. In turn, it spread along his palm and toward the black scythe. The scythe didn't seem to be a weapon but a living thing. It realized that something was wrong and automatically broke free from Kale's grip. It wasn't burned by the flames. Flying up from the ground of the highway, the sickle spun at high speed, forming a gray windmill that tore through the air. It seemed to be pulled by something into the ruins of the building. The spinning scythe cleaved through the obstacles along the way. The reinforced concrete was as fragile as tofu until it fell into the General Deathblade's hand that was buried inside. Bang! The General Deathblade readied its scythe and stood up from the ground, staring at Kale with flickering black eyes. An ominous aura of the undead lingered around its body. It can't be wrong. Kale looked at the scythe in the General Deathblade's hand and was extremely shocked. That scythe actually has a soul. After using the hanging ring to connect people with the source of magic power, Kale had a more direct understanding of magic and souls. Almost instantly, he determined that what attacked him just now was not the energy contained in the sickle itself, but the evil soul hidden in the blade. A weapon with a soul could no longer be considered a pure weapon. It was equivalent to a different kind of organism. Among the top weapons that Kale knew, Thor's hammer, eternal fire, Carrie's divine weapon, and even the Infinity Stone, etc., only contained special energy and infinite power. They did not form a soul that could think independently. This is my death blade. Under the sharp blade all are undead. General Deathblade laughed coldly. Holding the death blade scythe, it continued to dive forward and faced Kale with a clean slash. Under the slash of the dark blade, a black half-moon light was formed for a time. Kale's entire body was bathed in golden flames. Usually, when he met an opponent with a cold weapon, as long as he activated his fire god form, he would be unharmed even if he stood there and let the opponent hit him. After all, Just the inner flames that surrounded the surface of his body were as hot as 5,000 degrees Celsius. Many materials used to forge weapons would melt into molten iron at this temperature. But when it got close, General Deathblade's Deathblade was not only unharmed, it even ignored the golden flames and high temperature and directly slashed at the neck of Kale's body. Feeling a chill on his neck and the bottom of his heart, Kale's pupils shrank violently. He clapped his hands together and two golden flames intertwined into a ball. Suddenly, it exploded and shot towards General Deathblade's body. A high-temperature wave came. In the end, General Deathblade did not manage to slash down. It stopped at the last moment and lightly touched the ground with the tip of its foot. Its tall and burly body flipped nimbly in the air and flew over Kale's head, barely avoiding the explosion of the explosive flames. In the air, General Deathblade simply threw the scythe downwards. The scythe spun faster and continued to slash at the back of Kale's head. Kale did not turn his head. As if he had eyes on the back of his head, his closed palms suddenly opened to both sides. Along with his movements, the dust floating in the air was bounced away. The spinning scythe did not bounce away, but when it was half a meter away from Kale, the speed of its slashing and spinning became slower and slower. When there was only 1 centimeter left, the scythe completely stopped in the air. At this moment, in the area around Kale, the repulsive force had formed a dense wall of air. "Come back." General Deathblade, who had landed behind Garen, waved its hand. The scythe automatically flew back to its position like Thor's hammer and landed in its hand. "It's not just a normal slash." Kale turned around and lowered his eyes as he fell into deep thought. He had been defending all this time, wanting to use this opportunity to test General Deathblade's strength and the mysteries of the scythe weapon in its hand. The results made him more curious and surprised. General Deathblade's slash just now did not only target his body, it even caused his soul to throb a little. A death blade that can slay souls? Interesting. Again. Kale's lips curled into a smile. He raised his left hand that was wearing a hanging ring, while his right hand made an inexplicable seal. General Deathblade missed Kale by a hair's breadth over and over again. It wanted to charge forward in a spurt of energy. But the ground of the road suddenly retreated, causing it to remain in place and unable to get any closer to Kale. "I haven't used this move in a long time." Kale narrowed his eyes and waved his hand downwards. The buildings and the ground within a radius of a few hundred meters were flipped, reversed, and reorganized in a regular pattern. The ground became the sky, the buildings became the ground, and the scenery of the city was strangely distorted. This was the mirror image world. Everything was at the mercy of Kale, the only mage in this world. What is going on? General Deathblade widened its eyes in shock. Kale, who was standing on the ground in front of it, had already arrived on a floating platform that was suspended 100 meters in the air. The nearby skyscrapers were like a dense forest, so crowded that the sky turned into a few gaps. Kale stood on the floating platform and looked down at General Deathblade below. Without hesitation, he clasped his hands together again. General Deathblade looked out in shock and saw that the 4 skyscrapers beside it were like mechanical walls. They moved horizontally and horizontally towards it, as if they were going to crush it into a meat patty. "It's not that simple." General Deathblade snorted coldly. It jumped up on the spot and kept changing its steps. It kicked the outer walls of the buildings on both sides and rushed towards Kale, who was on the floating platform. "You stole my line." Kale shrugged and pressed down with his right hand. Chapter 494. The Mirror World of London, the border between the suburbs. Following a ripple of light from the diamond-shaped glass, a bald woman in a yellow robe stepped out and landed on the roof of one of the buildings. Behind the bald woman, a bearded young man in a gray mage uniform followed her to the rooftop of the building in the mirror world. The bearded young man looked at the bald woman in confusion. He looked around the empty mirror world and asked in surprise, "That Ancient One, I just felt the existence of magic. I'm learning basic spells from Mage Modu and the others. Why did you suddenly bring me to the mirror world?" The mirror world was a must-learn spell for mages. As a novice mage, he still knew about it, but he still couldn't open the portal to hear. "Strange, look over there." Mage Supreme Alpha Centauri stood on the edge of the rooftop and pointed. Strange looked in the direction of the prompt and his pupils shrank in surprise. 500 meters away, a golden red painted iron man flew up from the ground. One of his hands was flashing with electric light and kept hanging down, while the other hand was constantly firing light cannons at the street below. Carpet bombing broke out one after another. A female alien holding a black spear rushed out of the explosion. She kicked the outer wall of the building, her movements light and agile. While quickly dodging the bombardment, she threw the spear back quickly, almost piercing the Iron Man in the air. Looking at the fierce battle of life and death, Strange opened his mouth wide and said in surprise, "That's Iron Man? Who's the other one?" Because Kamartaj was isolated from the world, the inner mages mainly focused on cultivation. Therefore, except for the mages guarding the cauldron of all things, very few mages were aware of what was happening in the outside world. Ancient One said lightly, "Half an hour ago. Similar to New York last time, there was a hole in the sky above the city of London. Celestial bodies from multiple worlds converged and alien creatures from other worlds came to Earth." "So that's how it is." Strange nodded and touched his chin. He had new doubts. Then why are they in the mirror world? Did you pull them in? The Ancient One remained silent and did not respond. Strange. Just as he was feeling surprised, he felt that the entire building, no, the entire London in the mirror world was shaking due to an earthquake. "What's that?" Strange quickly looked at the source of the earthquake, which was 600 meters away. The buildings there were like chess pieces, controlled by an invisible hand. The city center of London was the chessboard that could be changed at will. The skyscrapers were like dominoes, following some kind of rule and falling down with a rumble. Then, like a meat grinder, it kept spinning on the ground. Damn it. The General Death Blade gripped its scythe tightly with both hands and twisted its body rapidly, forming a small tornado that broke through the inner wall of the building at the bottom, raising countless waves of debris and dust. However, before General Deathblade could find Kale's location, another building came crashing down on it like a bulldozer. General Deathblade was so frustrated that it wanted to vomit blood. Despite its strength, it kept hitting cotton balls. Hundreds of meters up in the sky, Kale stood on a floating platform decorated with magic seals and looked down coldly. His palms did not stop moving up and down, manipulating and changing the structure of the buildings in the center of London. The buildings were chess pieces and the world was the chessboard. It had to be said that the mage's long-range combat style was inexplicably satisfying. It opened the door to a new world for Kale, who was good at close combat. Did someone come in? While Kale was controlling the mirror world to fight against General Deathblade, he seemed to have sensed something and glanced to the side. His gaze swept across hundreds of meters and landed on Alpha Centauri and Strange, who were standing on the rooftop of a building in the distance. Instead of participating in the battle, he brought a newcomer to watch the show. Strange, it's still too early to fight. Kale shook his head and looked away indifferently. That's Mr. Kale. It's Mr. Kale, right? Strange looked at Alpha Centauri. After Alpha Centauri nodded, he said thoughtfully, Mr. Kale actually knows our Kamartaj spells. No wonder he asked such a strange question at the hospital last time. But why haven't I heard Mo and the others mention Mr. Kale? He's my senior, right? Senior brother or senior uncle? No, Strange. Strange, you're wrong. Ancient One looked at Kale's figure in the distance and shook his head gently. General Kale has never entered Kamartaj, and I have never taught him any spells. Strange opened his mouth in shock. Then why does he know spells and is so skilled? Speaking of which, we have to go back to 70 years ago. Ancient One's face was calm as he recalled. At that time, Mr. Kale was a young major general in the limelight. You had a senior brother who guarded the New York sanctum. He wanted to test General Kale's ability, so he pulled him into the mirror dimension alone. And then? Strange asked curiously. Ancient One said, half an hour later. General Kale took the ring from your senior brother and opened the portal to the mirror dimension to return to the real world. Before that, General Kale didn't know the existence of our guardian mage on Earth. Really? Strange was shocked. One must know that he barely opened the portal and it took him a full week. He could already be considered as Kamartaj's type with excellent aptitude. Mr. Kyle, on the other hand, only took half an hour to use the portal and freely enter and exit the mirror space. Who would believe that? Maybe it didn't take half an hour. After all, your senior brother had a fight with General Kale. Ancient One said this and couldn't help but sigh from the bottom of his heart. Strange. You and I have to believe that there really are top geniuses in the world. Not only are they born with knowledge, but they may also understand the mysteries and rules in their hearts with just a glance. I spent hundreds of years practicing and manipulating the mirror dimension, but I'm not much stronger than General Kale now. Ancient One's calm face showed a faint look of admiration. In this world, the only person who could make her sincerely admire was probably Kale. This is the talent of a top genius. Strange smiled bitterly and clenched his fists tightly. The last trace of pride he had was ruthlessly shattered. He felt that he was no different from a clown. I still have a question. Strange took a deep breath and said, Ancient One, since Mr. Kale is so talented, why don't you pull him into Kamartush? With him as a guardian we can definitely. Before Strange could finish his words, Ancient One interrupted him. Impossible. General Kale and Kamartaj are not fated, and even if I invite him, he won't join. Ancient One. Strange looked at Alpha Centauri and said bluntly, Are you afraid? For hundreds of years, there has finally appeared the only person who is beyond your understanding. When people face things that they can't control and understand, they often choose to escape. Chapter 495. Inside London's Mirror Dimension. Facing Strange's questioning words, the Ancient One did not respond immediately. Her clean and white face was as calm as ever. Facing the aftermath of the strong wind, she quietly looked at Kale, who was standing on a floating platform 500 meters away, as if he was in control of the situation. The Ancient One let out an inaudible sigh in her heart. Although she had lived and cultivated for hundreds of years, peaked at the tip of the iceberg of the universe's natural mysteries, and even created the transcendental Kamartaj. But the worries of being the Earth's guardian had been lingering in her heart like an endless rain. She was tired and tired. She clearly knew that according to the rules and common sense, the safety of the Earth could not be guaranteed. For example, potential enemies like Domum were beyond common sense and understanding. But when she saw Kale, who appeared out of nowhere during World War II, the Ancient One did not feel the burden on her shoulders lighten. Instead, it deepened her worries. Thus, she had been secretly observing Kale but did not have any deep contact with him. Perhaps Strange was right. She had always been afraid and wary of Kale. Ever since World War II she had never stopped. Every moment, every second she wanted to turn the tables. But that man walked further and further away, until even catching up with him became an extravagant hope. Strange. The Ancient One seemed to have made some kind of decision. Her eyes were firm and she asked faintly, Do you know why I brought you here? What? Strange scratched his head and looked at the battle hundreds of meters away. He guessed, to help? Strange had just finished speaking when in the battle, a series of skyscrapers fell with a regular roar. Several crescent moon slashes came from the bottom of a collapsed building, blasting a hole that could allow people to pass through. General Deathblade crawled out of the building in a sorry state. Its hair was disheveled and its black-gray cloak was already tattered. It looked up at the sky with a ferocious face. What's this? You don't dare to fight me in close combat? Are you afraid? Before the General Deathblade could finish his sentence, a dazzling beam of light descended from the sky, traversing hundreds of meters in an instant, almost ignoring the distance between them. General Deathblade's pupils shrank instinctively. What was reflected in his eyes was a human body emitting a dazzling light, dragging a trail of light behind it, and a leg that was faster than light. Have you ever been kicked by light? The Deathblade General didn't have any reaction to these words. Instead, the flowing light kick descended upon it like a divine punishment. Not only was it so fast that it could not be seen clearly with the naked eye, the impact of that kick was so great that it even caused a huge explosion of air where it stood. Bang, bang, bang. The General Deathblade was sent flying backwards like a small pebble skipping across water. It scraped across the ground made up of buildings and plowed out a 50-meter-long trail. In the end, it rolled and smashed into a vertical building. The 10-story residential building collapsed with a rumble. Is that Mr. Kale? So strong. Seeing this scene, Strange forced a smile and denied himself. I was wrong just now. With my current level, if I can't even deal with Mr. Kale and the others, even if there were 10 of me, I would still die. You're not participating in the battle, but just watching? Strange looked at the Ancient One, waiting for her answer. The Ancient One looked back and gave him a look to understand. She said calmly, Strange. I brought you here to let you see for yourself the strength of Earth's top powerhouses and potential enemies. Strange smiled bitterly and spread out his hands. Now I've seen it. The gap between us is like a chasm. Even if I'm 100 meters away from the battle, the aftermath would be enough to kill me. The Ancient One said indifferently, It's fine if you know the gap, but I'm afraid you don't even know the gap. If you know the gap and recognize yourself, there's a possibility of catching up. Ancient One, what do you mean? Strange's eyelids twitched. He suddenly had a bad premonition. Isn't it obvious? The Ancient One looked away from Strange and looked at Kale in the distance again. His whole body was burning with flames and was as dazzling as the sun. I want you to set that man as your goal and keep moving forward until You surpass him. Catch up, surpass, until you surpass the boundary of a sorcerer. This was the Alpha Centauri's hope for Strange. Surpass Mr. Kale? Strange was dumbstruck and speechless upon hearing this. In the battle, Kale's tall and perfect body and his casual clothes were surrounded by colorful flames of both holiness and destruction. Retracting his left foot, Kale's golden eyes were filled with surprise. The kick just now did not hit the body but something as hard as steel. Obviously it was blocked by the other party in the end. One had to know. Kale's fastest kick in his double star form had destroyed the Skynet defense of the New Star Core and destroyed the interstellar spaceship of the Kree civilization. To be able to block that kick, this is getting more and more interesting. The corner of Kale's mouth rose slightly, revealing a devilish smile. 50 meters away, in the ruins of a residential building. First, the black scythe flew out. General Deathblade held the scythe tightly with one hand and used the flying scythe to pull out the body buried below. General Deathblade gasped for breath and spat out a mouthful of blood. It raised its head in shock and looked at the dazzling Kale in front of it. Compared to Kale's surprise, General Deathblade was even more shocked. So fast, such amazing speed. His aura has completely changed. It's like he's a completely different person. General Deathblade's face was very ugly. It thought that the other party was not good at close combat, but in the end it could not react to the kick at all. If Deathblade's scythe had not protected its owner and blocked the light kick in time, it would have been crippled even if it did not die. The scythe in General Deathblade's hands, in addition to various rare materials in the universe, was also forged with half of its own soul. That was why the scythe had a soul consciousness and could even injure the souls of others in battle. In other words, General Deathblade's strength did not come from its own body, but from the scythe that was part of its body, Deathblade's scythe. It's dangerous to fight that man in close combat. General Deathblade quickly realized that fear was deeply engraved in its heart. The other party's movement speed was comparable to the speed of light, and the strength of the kick was not an exaggeration to call it the impact of a meteor. Against a human whose speed and strength had reached the pinnacle, it was very likely that it would not even know how it died in close combat. Speaking of which, is the other party really human? General Deathblade was about to start doubting life. This had already overturned its understanding. Shouldn't humans be inferior creatures with weak limbs? Why was the man in front of it even more monstrous than a monster? Chapter 496. I'm going to continue. Kale, who was in his double star form, tapped the ground lightly with his toes. His body was light as a feather as he floated 10 meters above the ground. It was as if he had replaced the sun. His entire body was burning with a dazzling light. The air around him was slightly distorted and trembled. Strange could feel this kind of shocking pressure even from 500 meters away as well as General Deathblade. Strange's mouth was dry as he said bitterly, "Ancient One, you were joking just now, right? You want me to surpass Mr. Kale? How is this possible?" With Kale's current height, even catching up to him was an extravagant hope, let alone surpassing him. Do I look like someone who jokes? Ancient One glanced at him and said lightly, "Don't worry. I'm not asking you to defeat him. You just need to surpass him in the field of magic." It's just that in terms of magic. This is also very difficult. Strange frowned. He did not know if Ancient One had placed some kind of obsession on him, making him feel inexplicably like a huge burden was on his shoulders. Strange. You may be the best among us. If even you can't surpass that man, then no one in the world can. Ancient One sighed in his heart but did not say anything. He continued to pay attention to the battle situation in the mirror world. On the main battlefield, facing Kale in his double star form, General Deathblade, who had suffered a loss, did not dare to rashly engage in close combat. Instead, he threw the Deathblade scythe in his hand forward. As soon as the scythe left his hand, it immediately spun at high speed like a black moon. It sharply tore through the air, bringing along a gust of wind as it flew rapidly towards Kale, who was in midair. Kale raised his eyebrows and casually blasted out a beam of high-energy light cannon. As a result, it was cut in half by the scythe. The chaotic energy exploded at low altitude. Deathblade's scythe's speed did not decrease sharply. Instead, it kept accelerating as it slashed towards him. Without General Deathblade's grip, Deathblade's scythe seemed to have broken free from its shackles. Whether it was its speed or slashing power, it was several times higher than before. Interesting. Kyle had never fought with a weapon before. When he saw the scythe flying towards him, he couldn't help but open his hands. The moment before the scythe hit his chest, His palms closed as fast as lightning, accurately catching the slightly curved blade of the scythe. Death blade empty-handed. Buzz, the 2-meter-long scythe in Kale's hand continued to tremble and hum. Not only was it not afraid of the power of the 2 stars, it was also not at a disadvantage in terms of strength. Meanwhile, there was also an invisible slash that ignored Kale's physical defense and silently slashed at his soul. It hit. On the ground, General Deathblade's face was filled with joy, but after a few seconds, Kale continued to wrestle with the scythe in the air as if nothing had happened. What's going on? I clearly felt that I had struck him earlier, so why didn't it do anything? General Deathblade was a little confused. Countless strong extraterrestrial enemies had also suffered under its invisible soul slash. Once Deathblade's scythe hit the soul, the body of the living being would die on the spot or lose consciousness for a short period of time. In the short period of time of losing consciousness, Deathblade's scythe was more than enough to cut off the other party's head. But when this law fell on the human youth in front of it, it did not work. General Deathblade of course did not know that as a reborn transmigrator, Kale's soul was already extraordinary. Even though Kale had split half of his body into superhuman doppelgangers, his soul foundation was already strong to begin with. After being tempered by the origin stone and magical power, his soul had already reached a peak value. If the soul of a normal living being was a weak candle flame, then Kale's soul was an endless torch. The soul slash just now did hit Kale's soul, but it was like scratching an itch. It did not hurt at all. In the air. Not bad. Kale's face showed surprise. His hand trembled and he was a little unable to control the scythe. He pushed his hands to the side and Deathblade's scythe immediately flew out of his hands. It was the first time that a weapon was able to fight against him when he was in his dual star form. The scythe was still spinning like a boomerang. It locked onto Kale and turned back to launch a new round of slashes. General Deathblade sneered, "As long as Deathblade has locked onto you as a target, it will chase you to the end of the universe until it cuts off your head." "Then I'd like to try." Kale shrugged and accelerated, turning into a dazzling stream of light. The scythe also turned into a gray stream of light and chased after him. The two of them began a chase in the sky above London in the mirror space. No matter where Kale flew, the scythe would chase after him. Its speed was not much slower than the speed of light. Within a dozen seconds, the 2-star Kale and Deathblade scythe had circled London more than 10 times. Until Kale returned to the city center from the edge of London and then dived down diagonally. Deathblade's scythe was about 3 meters behind him. At the last moment, Kale turned back like lightning, dragging an arc of light behind him. He rushed toward General Deathblade on the ground without any warning. When he arrived in front of it, he quickly dodged to the side. General Deathblade only saw a blur in front of its eyes. A dazzling light flashed past, and then what was reflected in its eyes was Deathblade's scythe, which had merged with its soul, continuously slashing toward it. In the nick of time, the Deathblade scythe flashed to the side at high speed, barely avoiding the Deathblade general's body. It only managed to leave a ghastly gash on its arm as it continued to chase after Kyle behind it. That was close. I was almost killed by my own weapon. General Deathblade swallowed its saliva with lingering fear. At this moment, it saw a small spark spinning into a wheel about a meter in front of it. A circular hole opened up. This is. General Deathblade's eyes widened in shock. Then a gray stream of light flew out of the portal again. The gray stream of light sank into General Deathblade's chest without any suspense. It directly pierced through his stomach and flew out with a large amount of blood spurting out from his back. Whoosh! The gray stream of light suddenly stopped and stabbed into the ground. With a black and gray background and a crescent-shaped blade, what else could it be but Deathblade's scythe? Why did it appear in front of me? All of this happened too suddenly. General Deathblade's face was full of disbelief. It looked down at its chest that had a large hole in it. Then it looked back and saw a second portal floating 10 meters behind it. It was exactly the same as the one in front of it. So, it wasn't a close call. General Deathblade smiled bitterly and spat out a large mouthful of blood. Then it fell straight to the ground and quickly lost all signs of life. Victory and defeat had been decided. You didn't expect this, did you? Kale landed lightly on the ground. With a wave of his hand, he removed the two portals that were connected together. He looked at General Deathblade's corpse on the ground and shook his head indifferently. A weapon is a weapon in the end. Only by being strong is the truth. Controlling the scythe to attack from afar would not take any risks. This was true. But even a 10-year-old child knew that once the weapon left the body would become the biggest weakness. From the moment General Deathblade chose to give up on fighting Kale in close combat, it had already lost. Chapter 497. Inside the mirror dimension parallel to London, the second battlefield between Iron Man and Proxima Archangel. Although the intensity of the battle here was not as intense as Kale's, it still covered the city within 100 meters. The buildings, streets, and roads were all scorched black after being ravaged by cannonballs. There were flames everywhere and thick pungent black smoke curled up and floated up. Pop! A steel man with golden-red paint scratches on the surface fell from the sky and fell directly into the ruins formed by the collapse of the house. A burst of sand and dust was raised on the spot and finally, it rolled a few more times before coming to a stop. The mask on the front of the steel man's head was mostly damaged, revealing half of Tani's mature and determined face. He lay on the rubble and broken tiles, gasping for breath. His limbs, protected by steel armor, were damaged by the spear, and they were in a scrapped state, constantly surrounded by white electric light. Ta-ta! A vigorous dark purple silhouette jumped down and landed in front of Tony. It was Proxima Dark Knight who was fighting against Tony. Proxima Archangel was holding a black spear, its original alien uniform was scorched black and messy, and there was blood at the corner of its mouth. Obviously this battle was not easy for it, but it still stood to the end. Wiping the blood from the corner of its mouth, Proxima Archangel stepped forward, the tip of its spear flashing with purple light. It looked down coldly at Tani lying on the ground and said coldly, "Can't do it anymore? No matter if it is a biological or technological product, as long as it is attacked by my spear, its internal nervous system will be damaged and scrapped. Now that the steel armor on your limbs is all scrapped, how are you going to fight me?" Tani did not respond to Proxima Archangel, nor did he take off his steel armor. Instead, he gasped for breath, trying to buy even a second. "Are you still waiting for the battle over there to end? Don't be delusional, General Deathblade can be ranked in the top 3 among us. Countless Star Masters have died under its Deathblade, and that human man is no exception." Proxima Archangel sneered, raised the spear in its hand, and was about to give Tani the final blow. But suddenly, Proxima Dark Knight shuddered as he looked sideways in a certain direction. His face was filled with disbelief and a bit of panic. "How is it? Has the outcome of the battle been decided?" Tani felt relieved. He looked at Proxima Centauri with a serious face and smiled. "Let me guess. It should be my godfather who won, right?" "Shut up. Shut up, you earthling." Dark Proxima Centauri's hand that was holding the spear was still trembling as he shouted in a nervous manner. The General Deathblade's aura had disappeared. His connection with it had also been completely severed in an instant. However, that human man's aura still existed, and it was so strong that it was difficult to describe it with words. All of this information pointed to one thing. The General Deathblade, who had fought for many years under the command of Master Thanos, had died, defeated by the native humans of a barren planet. How is this possible? How is this possible? Proxima Centauri muttered to himself, unable to accept the fact in front of him. Tani continued, "You may not know, but among us, Godfather is the absolute number one. He has not tasted defeat for decades." "Shut up. I told you to shut up." Proxima Centauri's face became more and more ferocious. He was so angry that he almost lost his mind. He looked down at Tani again and raised the spear in his hand above his head. "Even if you win, you will die here." As soon as Proxima Centauri finished speaking, he didn't hesitate at all. He slammed the spear in his hand down and inserted it into the shining chest of Tani's Iron Man armor, which was the Krypton energy core that provided the entire armor. "This is the moment, Jarvis," Tani suddenly shouted. "Understood, sir." With Jarvis's words, the Iron Man armor suddenly disintegrated and separated from Tony's body to both sides. Tani's hasty tactical roll just avoided the fatal blow of Proxima Centauri's spear. "Wanna run?" The spear was inserted into the ground and Proxima Centauri's pupils shrank, and he was about to pursue Tani. But at this moment, the scattered parts of the Iron Man armor accelerated toward him and automatically put on Proxima Centauri's body. Proxima Centauri was shocked, but he couldn't get rid of the armor parts. In just half a second, his body was wrapped in the broken Iron Man armor. Proxima Centauri looked at Tani next to him and found that Tani had climbed up from the ground and smiled strangely at him. Tani didn't give him a chance to react and quickly issued instructions. "Jarvis, self-destruct the Mark 8 AK model." "What do you want to do?" "Let me go." The energy core in his chest flashed with a dazzling light, and Proxima Centauri had an ominous premonition in his heart, and he couldn't help but scream loudly. Let me teach you a lesson. Until the last second you don't know who will win or lose. Tani waved at Proxima Centauri and fell back. The next moment, in the desperate scream of Proxima Centauri, the Iron Man armor he was wearing activated the self-destruct mode. With a boom, the armor and the person turned into a fireball together, the parts and minced meat burst to the side, and the aftermath of the impact pushed Tani, who was a few meters away, 10 meters away. Cough. Tony struggled to get up from the ground. When he confirmed that only the spear was left on the scorched earth in front of him, he let out a long sigh of relief. He followed the exhaustion of his body and laid down on the ground, revealing an expression of relief. In the second battle, Iron Man Tani won by a narrow margin. On the other side, in the central square of London in the real world, the phenomenon of celestial bodies converging in the sky has come to an end. With a burst of blurred light and shadow, Earth, London and the dark world are connected again. A gust of cold wind blew past. Next to the fountain in the empty square, Mock's figure gradually emerged. It knelt on the ground, its body twitching and trembling. The red ether energy continued to escape and dissipate from the surface of its body, and its powerful momentum and vitality continued to plummet. How can it be my power? Mock's eyes were dull, and it reached out to grab the escaping ether energy, but the red mist was still flowing through its fingers. Another gust of wind blew past. In the square area in front of Mock's, a red cloak appeared, and then it was Thor's hammer, silver armor, rough and wild blonde hair. Thor appeared in the square with a cold face, holding Thor's hammer and walking toward Mock's. Thor looked at the red energy dissipating from Mock's body and said in a deep voice, "My father once said, never rely too much on external objects and the power of a third party. Only when one's heart is strong can one be truly strong. If you rely on the power you received, you can't even defeat me, let alone Kale. Besides, the ether particles are not on you. It's just the remaining energy given to you by others, and it'll be gone after you use it up." Thor came to Mox and raised Thor's hammer. Lightning wrapped around his arm and the hammer, and the wind blew his blonde hair, making him look wilder and more domineering. Mox stayed where he was, stunned. He had already given up resisting, lost in the power of the commander level and unable to extricate himself. Go repent in hell. Chapter 498. In the sky above London. The 8 overlapping reflections of the world began to vanish one after another. Dark clouds surged, and the phenomenon of celestial bodies converging finally came to an end. With a terrifying flash of lightning and thunder, raindrops the size of beans fell, washing away the smoke and scars of the war in London. Thor held the blood-stained Thor's hammer tightly, standing in the square in the pouring rain. He looked down at Mock's corpse on the ground, his chest still heaving up and down as he panted heavily. "Mother, I have avenged you, but so what if he killed his enemy? The dead would never come back." Thor's face was full of sorrow. He looked up at the sky. The rain drenched him from head to toe, and he could no longer tell if it was water or tears on his face. After standing in a daze for a long time, Thor suddenly heard a familiar shout from behind him. "Thor, Thor." Saul looked back. It was his girlfriend Jane. She ran towards him in the heavy rain, and with one last leap, she threw herself into his broad, strong chest. Thor hugged her back. Deep in love, the two of them hugged and kissed. After the passion, Thor looked down at Jane and asked curiously, "Jane? Why are you here?" She simply explained how she was abducted by his brother, Loki, and after an hour on a certain planet, Loki sent her back to London on Earth. "Loki," Thor frowned, thinking of the ether particles, and asked, "He didn't do anything to you?" "No." Jane shook her head gently. Thinking of Loki's excited and happy expression when he sent her back, she could not help but ponder. "I'm not an important person to him. In the end, he seemed to have achieved some goal, so he did not force me to stay and sent me back here directly." Achieved some goal? That bastard, what is he planning again? Although Thor said so, he could never hate Loki. Instead, he maintained the attitude of a brother who expected better from him. Thor thought about it and said to Jane, "Jane, stay on Earth. With Kale here you'll be safe. I'll make a trip back to the deity realm and report the situation to Royal Father." Jane nodded in agreement and sighed in her heart. The two of them should be the most distant long-distance relationship. After a beam of light from the Bifrost Bridge descended from the sky, Thor turned into the corpse of Mox and disappeared from the central square of London. Meanwhile, inside the mirror space, Go back and work hard on your cultivation. The distance between you and them is not in the same dimension. The Ancient One drew a circle with his right hand and made a seal. He opened the portal to the outside world and left the mirror dimension first. Strange nodded with deep understanding. He looked back at the alien battleship that had crashed into the city, and the mirror world of London that had been ravaged into ruins. If this wasn't the mirror dimension, the damage wouldn't be any better than New York City. Can I really catch up with their figures? Strange muttered to himself and didn't think too much. He followed the Ancient One and disappeared into the portal. In the mirror dimension of London, Tony was lying on the charred ground, gasping for air. With a rustling sound, a tall and straight figure appeared in front of him and stretched out his hand. Godfather. Tony opened his eyes with difficulty. When he saw the person who came, he couldn't help but smile and reached out to hold Cale's hand. Cale pulled Tony up from the ground and patted him on the shoulder. He smiled faintly and said, "You did well this time. I was the one who was almost killed." Tony smiled bitterly and looked at the spear that was inserted into the ground. He said with lingering fear, "Are all Thanos' subordinates so strong? Thanos will be stronger." Cale's face was calm as he said meaningfully, "Don't let your guard down. Work hard to equip yourself. This long-lasting war has just begun." Although Cale and Thanos had not met yet, they both had infinite primordial stones or information about them. One of their ultimate goals was to collect 6 infinite primordial stones. The previous battle between New York and Galaxy Kree on Earth was just a small spark of friction. Last time, 2 people from Cale's camp were kidnapped by Thanos' subordinates. This time, Cale and Tony killed 2 generals from Thanos' camp. It was a temporary tie. The competition between Cale and Thanos for the gemstones would get bigger and bigger. In the end, it would be a full-scale war that would not stop until one of them was dead. I can already smell the gunpowder and have made some preventive preparations." Tony nodded and was about to say something when a melodious ringtone suddenly sounded in his trouser pocket. Tony instinctively took out his phone. When he saw Little Pepper's name on the screen, he looked at Cale in surprise. "Isn't this mirror world an independent and sealed world? How can a call come in?" Cale smiled faintly and said, "Someone opened a portal to the outside world and temporarily connected the 2 worlds." Tony did not have time to ask who it was. Under the urging of the ringtone, he picked up the call. Little Pepper's anxious voice immediately came from the phone. "Tony, where have you been? Why can't I get through? Are you okay?" "Of course I'm fine. The matter is settled. Godfather is beside me too. What could happen?" Tony endured the pain and pretended to be relaxed. Little Pepper continued, "That's good. I'll tell you." Tony listened and nodded. After hanging up the phone, he took a deep breath and said to Cale, "Godfather. Little Pepper asked me to go back with you for dinner tonight." Before Cale could respond, Tony quickly added, "This is an invitation from my father. He said that he has something to tell you." "Howard?" Cale raised his eyebrows in surprise. Thinking about it, he had not seen Howard since returning to Earth from the Milky Way Alliance. He simply agreed. "Okay, since the matter has come to an end, I can't be bothered to interfere too much with Thor's family matters. Let the people from Family Cal and SHLD handle the aftermath in London. Let's have a celebratory feast and have a good drink when we get back." Tony quickly said, "No problem." The rest of the matter was simple. Cale contacted Heimdall and asked him to search for the missing vice in the underworld. On the other hand, he contacted Yutong and asked her to send Family Cal members to the mirror image world to clean up the battle. As for the city of London in the real world, Tony contacted Fry and asked him to send us HLD agents to clean up the aftermath. That afternoon, various news channels were still crazily reporting on the sensational news of the symbol of peace Cale, Iron Man Tony, and Thor, as well as Thor, appearing in the city of London and engaging in a fierce battle with alien invaders. The world was in an uproar because of this and it was upgraded to a hot topic. That night, Cale and Tony had changed into tuxedo suits. They brought Lucy and Little Pepper, respectively, to Howard's lakeside villa in the suburbs of New York for dinner. Chapter 499. The lakeside villa on the outskirts of New York. This was a retirement home that Tony had bought for Howard according to his request. Next to the 2-story wooden villa were beautiful forests and lakes, and there were few people around. When Cale arrived here in Tony's car, he couldn't believe it. Howard was a science freak, and even on a wild planet in the Milky Way Alliance, he had built a high-tech defense building with his bare hands. Yet, he was living in such a simple house on Earth. When Cale entered the villa, He was even more surprised when he saw Howard sitting on an old chair in the hall, reading a book with his reading glasses. Howard had aged a lot compared to 4 months ago. His hair was all white and his face was dry and wrinkled. It was full of the marks of the vicissitudes of life. Lucy covered her mouth in disbelief and blurted out, "Howard, why didn't you use the infinite formula to slow down your aging?" "Lucy." Cale waved his hand in time and interrupted Lucy's words. He took a few steps forward and looked down at Howard sitting on the chair. Although Howard was as old as an 80-year-old man, he was still clear-headed. He raised his head and looked at Cale. He took off his reading glasses and put down the book in his hand. He said softly, "Master, you're here." Cale laughed and scolded, "Howard, you're always having problems, aren't you? Your brain isn't working anymore. You didn't use the infinite formula, and you didn't ask me for natural lifespan." Howard smiled. He naturally knew that the Master was omnipotent. Even if he wanted eternal life, the Master could do it. But he didn't need that kind of thing. "Master." Howard smiled and said, "I used to think that scientific research was everything to me. So, I was always afraid that I would die one day, afraid that I would no longer be able to research and see the crystallization of wisdom in the future. But it wasn't until I joined Family Cal and had Tani that I gradually understood the importance of family." Howard paused for a moment before continuing, "During my days of wandering in space, I've seen the beauty of science. Now that my family is back, I have no regrets in life. Tani has also surpassed his father and inherited Stark Industries. I can finally rest and retire at ease." At the door, Tani and Boz were standing hand in hand, leaning against each other as they looked at Howard happily. "I understand. If this is what you want, then I have nothing more to say." Cale nodded. He respected Howard's decision. It could be seen that Howard was really tired. From the Second World War to the galactic battlefield, he had been silently contributing behind the scenes. Now that he had quietly disappeared from the world, there was nothing wrong with that. It was just that there were fewer and fewer acquaintances in the same generation, which made Cale feel a little disappointed. If one day even Captain America Steve, Thor, and Sorcerer Supreme Alpha Centauri were no longer in this world, then perhaps the world would really be silent. Howard raised his turbid eyes and coughed softly. "Tani, Boz, go to the second floor first and prepare dinner. I have something to talk to Master Cale alone." "Okay." Tani nodded immediately. "Lucy, let's go to the second floor together." Boz leaned over to hold Lucy's arm and smiled. "Okay." Lucy obediently followed Boz and went to the second floor with Tani, leaving the hall to Howard and Cale. Cale did not stand on ceremony. He went to the sofa opposite the chair and sat down with his legs crossed. "Between you and me, just say whatever you want to say." "Okay." Howard nodded and went straight to the point. "Have you heard of Hank Pym?" "Pym?" Cale's eyes flashed. He did not expect to hear this name from Howard. Howard recalled the past and stated, "Hank was a very outstanding scientist. His wisdom was not below mine. When you left Earth at the end of the Second World War, Hank Pym joined us, HLD, as a soldier and scientist. He worked with me for a period of time. He invented an item. Even now I'm still shocked by it. I've spent half my life researching it, but it's still hard to surpass it." "What's that?" Cale pretended not to understand and asked. "The Pym particle." Howard took a deep breath and said, "It's an important technology that allows it to expand and shrink at will. Hank also mastered the method to control ants and used Pym's technology to create Ant-Man battle suits. He and his wife once transformed into SHL, Special Agent Ant-Man, to protect the world during the transition between the old era and the new era." Cale said calmly, "And then? As far as I know, there's no such thing as Ant-Man in SHL now." "Yes. I only found out after I returned to Earth and asked someone to investigate." Howard slowly turned around and took out a file from behind his back. He took out a file and placed it on the table. The front was a bespectacled old man with white hair on his temples. "After I left Earth, during a special operation in 1975, Hank Pym was judged to be dead because his wife had shrunk in order to prevent a nuclear explosion. Hank had a falling out with SHL because of this, and he hid the Pym technology that he invented. That's why no one knows about it." Cale picked up Hank Pym's personal file and flipped through the pages. The content was similar to what he had asked Yu Tong to investigate. Howard continued, "Later, Hank opened a company called Pym Technology, but he didn't publicly excavate the core technology of the Pym particle. Instead, he invested in technology and engineering. He has been retired for several years now, and the PIM particle has disappeared from the world for decades. Cale put down the file and looked at Howard. Then you're bringing this up now because you want me to? Howard looked slightly excited and said, family head. The PIM particle is a top-notch technological product no less than infinite energy, Iron Man armor, and artificial intelligence. If we can reasonably use the PIM particle technology, we can definitely raise the level of our current technological civilization. Cale nodded in agreement and narrowed his eyes. I understand what you mean. If possible, it's best to pull Hank Pym into the family, Cal. Otherwise, at least master the PIM particle technology. Howard nodded solemnly. He also felt a little guilty towards Hank Pym. No matter what, he wanted to make up for it a little. In fact, previously, Cale had already done a series of investigations and plans on the ant people and PIM technology. It was just that he first focused on the strange doctor and the small spiders. Then he happened to encounter the Dark Elves' attack in the Divine Dominion, so he didn't have time to make a move. But now, since Howard specially mentioned it, and the matter in the Divine Dominion had just been resolved, he could try to make contact with the ant people. Leave this matter to me. Cale smiled faintly. He already had an idea in his mind. Chapter 500. 3 days later at noon. A stylish white vintage car drove into New York City from the suburbs against the warm sun and breeze. After entering one of the main roads, it headed straight to the bustling city area filled with commercial buildings. After passing through the security checkpoint, the vintage car braked to a stop. As the window rolled down, a stern-looking old man sat in the driver's seat. He was wearing a gentleman's suit and a pair of sunglasses. He handed several documents to the security officer in an orderly manner. The security officer looked down at the documents and immediately handed them over. Hank Pym. Welcome back to New York, Mr. Pym. I'm not dead yet, that's all. Hank Pym mocked himself, took back the documents and continued to drive to the address. Just yesterday morning, the chairman of PIM Technology, who managed Hank Pym on behalf of PIM Technology, suddenly called him and said that the company had something important to announce. Even his daughter, who was the manager, asked him to come back to the company. Hank Pym, who had retired for many years, did not think too much about it. He canceled his original vacation plan and went to PIM Technology, which he built with his own hands. PIM Technology's main business was technology and engineering. It was more high-end and not as famous as Stark Industries. However, it was still one of the rare technology companies in New York. When Hank Pym arrived at the main building of PIM Technology, there were already many invited businessmen. When Hank Pym was about to enter the lobby, the extra security officer at the door quickly stopped him. Sir, please show your ID card or our company's invitation. Take a look at that first. Hank Pym pointed at the founder's photo on the first floor and took off his glasses, revealing a face that was almost identical to the one in the photo. Sorry sir, please come in, please come in. The security officer was shocked to see the real founder of the company for the first time. He quickly stepped aside and bowed with a welcoming gesture. Hank Pym did not mind. He walked into the lobby and soon saw his daughter, Hope Van Dyne. Hope was 30 years old and unmarried. She was definitely a strong career woman. Since Hank retired, she had been staying at PIM Technology as his successor as the general manager. Hank Pym couldn't help but think of his late wife when he saw Hopper in a mature suit with shoulder-length hair and light makeup walking towards him with a smile. It had been almost 30 years since the disappearance of the first generation of ant people. The current chairman and doctor of PIM Technology, Darren Cross, led a group of businessmen out of the reception hall on the second floor. When Cross saw Hank Pym in the lobby, he immediately clapped his hands excitedly and said, "Everyone please take a look. That is the founder of PIM Technology Company and also my life mentor, Hank Pym. Please give him a round of applause." Hank Pym had seen countless grand occasions. He stood in the middle of the lobby and gladly accepted the attention and applause from the people in the industry. Cross went downstairs and shook hands with Hank Pym. After exchanging a few warm greetings, he said impatiently, "Since Mr. Pym is here, let's go to the demonstration hall on the third floor and reveal the purpose and meaning of gathering everyone here today." Cross led the group to the third floor of PIM Technology's headquarters. It was the demonstration hall for the release of technological products. The demonstration hall was very spacious, enough to accommodate 30 people without feeling crowded. A large screen was built into the wall, and the building structure was made of glass and metal. It looked very high-end and a strong technological aura came from it. Cross was a professional in his early 40s. Under the attention of many celebrities, he did not have stage fright. He walked to the center of the demonstration stage with his shiny bald head. After I took over PIM Technology Company, I've been working on developing a type of particle. By increasing the density and strength, I can change the distance between atoms. As soon as Cross's opening speech came out, it immediately attracted many people. However, it also made Hank Pym frown. He had an extremely bad premonition in his heart. This revolutionary idea that crosses the century actually appeared in the hands of my mentor 30 years ago. But why is it buried in Hank's cobweb-covered manuscripts? I have no way of knowing. Cross said, but you can think about it. If a soldier's body could shrink to the size of an insect, what would happen? At this point, Cross ignored Hank Pym's pale face and activated the controller in his hand in front of the crowd of businessmen. The big screen in the room suddenly lit up and played an ancient historical record. In the black and white picture, the Hydra soldiers were attacked by unknown creatures and fell to the ground inexplicably. As the picture continued to enlarge, a humanoid figure the size of an insect appeared. An ant-like person? Many people who saw the video exclaimed. Cross's face was even more fanatical as he said, "That's right, an Ant-Man. You will become an ultimate combat agent. With a size that is difficult to detect with the naked eye, he can easily complete infiltration missions that others can't." "I'm right, my mentor Hank." Cross smiled as he looked at the Ant-Man Hank Pym in the crowd. "That's just a legend." Hank Pym's face was still calm. "Is that so? Let's just treat it as a legend for now. But it's precisely because of the Ant-Man that gave me inspiration. I was wondering why I didn't use those particles and telescopic steel to create a special item." Cross moved his body aside. As he spoke, a pillar rose from the demonstration platform. Inside the glass tank carried by the pillar was a wasp-style combat suit the size of a thumb. "That's..." Hank Pym's eyes widened and he could no longer pretend to be calm. "This is the Wasp combat suit. It allows people to stretch and shrink at will, becoming the size of a wasp and becoming the most deadly ultimate combat weapon. It will be the ultimate weapon that will end the war of this era." Cross laughed loudly and played the concept video of the Wasp combat suit in detail. It was the content of countless unstoppable Waspmen marching to war all over the world. "Whoever wants to invest can place an order with me first." Cross ended the product announcement with his last ambitious sentence. It also caused many businessmen to discuss heatedly. Some people even bid on the spot, making Cross smile like a profiteer. After coming out of the demonstration hall, Hank Pym's expression was a little ugly. He called Cross to the side and said in a deep voice, "Darren, there's a reason why I hid the Pym particles. That thing isn't perfect enough. It shouldn't appear in the world. Hank, you could have cooperated with me, but it's too late now. You destroyed the Pym particles with your own hands. Now I'm going to bring it to greater heights." Cross clearly didn't listen to his advice. After saying a few words, he went to discuss the order with the businessmen. Hank Pym was silent. At this moment, Hope approached him and whispered, "Father, Darren still trusts me a lot. Darren still trusts me. Give me the Ant-Man battle suit and I'll take care of this." "No, you're not suitable." Hank Pym didn't hesitate and shook his head. He said in a low voice, "I have a candidate. Perhaps I can give it a try." After Hank Pym and the group of businessmen left the headquarters of Pym Technology, Cross returned to the demonstration hall. Cross returned to the demonstration hall alone. He faced an empty corner and said respectfully, "Mr. Kyle, everything you instructed has been completed." His voice echoed in the space of the demonstration hall. As the scene in the room rippled, the Wasp combat suit and the various big screens on the demonstration stage disappeared. The room was empty and only a few hovering drones were operating in midair. The cameras had turned off the surreal holographic images that had just been projected. No one knew that it was all a large-scale illusion created by technology. Cross, who was originally a bald man, returned to being a bearded young man wearing a glass helmet and holding a drone remote control. In the originally empty corner of the room, Cale was sitting on a chair with his legs crossed. He looked up at the bearded young man. "Well done, Quentin Baker. Although you were introduced by Howard, your ability to pass off as genuine really came in handy." Quentin said excitedly, "Thank you, Mr. Cale, for giving me a stage to showcase my talents. I hope to continue working for you." Cale nodded. "That will depend on your performance. You have to give Hank Pym enough pressure. Otherwise the Ant-Man won't appear so easily." "Yes." Quentin accepted the order. Chapter 501. Above the 9 realms, the Divine Palace. In the huge golden Divine Palace, Thor held Thor's hammer, a red cloak draped over his shoulders as he walked into the hall majestically. There was not a single person in the hall. It was very different from the bustling and glorious atmosphere of the past. Only the king of the Divine Realm, Odin, still sat on the throne exclusive to the king of the Divine Realm. "You're finally back, Thor?" Odin lowered his eyes and looked at Thor, who walked into the hall. "Father." Thor put down Thor's hammer and knelt on one knee. He reported respectfully, "The crisis caused by the celestial convergence has been successfully resolved. The Dark Elf army that invaded my Divine Realm last time, their leader, Mox, was also killed by me." Odin narrowed his eyes and remained silent as if he was thinking about something. "As for the ether particles in Jane's body, I've confirmed that they are no longer in her body. I suspect that Loki used the Tesseract to take the ether particles away." When Thor mentioned Loki, his eyes darkened. Ever since Loki betrayed the Divine Realm, he had a feeling that he was drifting further and further away from him. Odin nodded slightly and said in a deep voice, "All right, I understand. Get up. You've worked hard this time." Thor shook his head and did not stand up from the ground. Instead, he said seriously, "Yesterday, because of Jane and Mother, I encouraged Kale to break out of the Divine Realm with me. I will bear the consequences of this matter alone. I am willing to accept any punishment." "I see. Since you want to be punished so much, I'll fulfill your wish." Odin's face was solemn. He thought for a moment and said slowly, "Then I'll punish you to go to the borders of the various realms and fix the chaos caused by the celestial convergence." "Father." Thor's expression changed. This was far from a punishment. It was a responsibility that he should bear. "Go." Odin looked at him with a rare kind smile. "All right, I won't let you down." Thor's face was filled with determination. He picked up the Thor hammer and bowed to Odin, who was sitting on the throne. Swinging his red cloak, he walked out of the hall. Behind him, Odin's voice continued, "Thor, I will always be proud of you." "Royal Father." Thor took a deep breath. Without looking back, he strode out of the hall. After Thor left the Immortal Palace, the hall of the Immortal Palace returned to silence. Odin, who was sitting on the throne, revealed a strange smile. "I will always be proud of you. Old man, this sentence is really useful. I've been deceived for so many years." Odin smiled evilly. As his body twisted and changed, his white hair turned into glossy and elegant black hair. His clothes returned to their original black robes. His old and weathered face turned back into a young, handsome and gloomy appearance. It was the evil god Loki. Loki held the scepter in one hand and rested the other on the armrest. He sat on the throne and looked down at the huge and magnificent golden hall. Outside the Immortal Palace, the buildings of the people of the Divine Realm, the Rainbow Bridge, and the starry sunset were all in sight. The corners of Loki's mouth curled up slightly. This feeling is not bad. This was the goal that Loki wanted to achieve. After Loki used magic to disguise himself and swindle the ether particles from the future Captain America, he sent a fake message to Thanos, the false information that the ether particles were on Thor's group. This caused a dispute between Thanos' generals and the heroes of the Avengers camp. At the same time, Loki sneaked back to the Immortal Palace where there was no defense. He used the ether particles to increase the power of the ether particles and banished the weakened Odin down to the mortal world. He took the opportunity to disguise himself as Odin and sat on the throne. Everything was going according to his script. Only something went wrong in the middle. He was almost killed by Kale through the twin star energy beam from his fingertips. "Old man Odin, you didn't expect this, did you? What you took from me, I will take it all back with my own hands." Loki smiled coldly and put the scepter beside the throne. He opened his palms. The blue tesseract appeared in one hand and the red ether particles appeared in the other. 2 primordial stones in hand. The ambition in Loki's heart continued to grow. "Now that I have 2 infinite primordial stones, I have a great advantage over Thanos and Kale. When they are competing with each other, as long as I take advantage of the situation and gather 6 infinite primordial stones first, the entire 9 realms will submit to me." Right. Loki seemed to have thought of something. He first put away the ether particles, activated the tesseract, and summoned a cloud of space fog from the hall. The space fog and the portal of the earth mages had the same effect. The only difference was that the former was an exclusive skill of the dimensional primordial stones and was almost instantaneous. The latter needed to consume magic power and draw circles to cast the spell. Loki took a step toward the space fog. He did not need to go through the Rainbow Bridge. He directly crossed the universe and came to a residential room in New York on Earth. The interior of this room. The glass helmet was placed on the computer table. Quentin was sitting in front of the computer chair and working on a model. He was shocked when he heard the voice behind him. Quentin subconsciously turned his head. When he saw Loki, the surprise on his face immediately became natural. He put his hand on his chest and bowed slightly. "You are here, my master. Raise your eyes and look at me." Loki knocked the floor with the scepter. Quentin obediently raised his head. The black light hidden in his eyes flashed. "Not bad." The corner of Loki's mouth rose. No one except Loki knew that during the last battle in New York, he had not only used mind control on Hawkeye, a group of SHLD agents and scientists. It also accidentally allowed Loki to discover Quentin, a talent with extraordinary potential in the Stark Industries building. Could be said that Quentin was a seed of darkness that Loki had buried on Earth. It was not until today, half a year later, that he was finally able to play a role. Loki smiled. "Listen to me. As long as you get close to the Stark family, you will have a chance to come into contact with that man." Quentin hurriedly nodded and said, "Indeed. Now I have gained the initial trust of the symbol of peace, Stark Industries. In the near future, I will no longer be the mediocre scientist of the past, but the superhero, Mystique. No matter who you are only my subordinate. Don't forget this." Loki's face was cold. He gave Quentin a little warning and then asked curiously, "What have Kale and the others been doing recently?" "Pym particles, Ant-Man." Quentin blurted out. Under Loki's puzzled expression, he explained the Ant-Man in detail. "Miniaturized creatures that can change their size. Earth actually has such top-notch technology." Loki muttered to himself and sat down on a chair. Soon a smile appeared on his face. He ordered from the bottom of his heart, "Quentin, continue to do as Kale asked, but not only give him pressure and a sense of crisis, you have to take the opportunity to kill the Ant-Man and bring me the Pym particles." "Kill the Ant-Man?" Quentin hesitated and said, "Master, I'm only using the illusion projected by the drone to deceive people. In fact, I don't have many lethal means of attack." "You didn't before, but what if you have this?" Loki smiled evilly and stretched out his left palm. A red mist-like energy object appeared, spinning. "This is..." Quentin widened his eyes in shock and uncertainty. He felt an unprecedented power and might from it. "Open your body and mind and accept it." Loki gave a part of his ether energy to Quentin. He really wanted to know what kind of brilliant fire would erupt when the projection illusion created by technology combined with the profound energy of the Stone of Reality. Chapter 502. On the pendulum dome of the New York Cathedral. How boring. Peter, wearing a brand new spider suit with a blue and red background, was sitting on a 50-meter-high pendulum, swinging his legs idly, looking down at the peaceful New York City below and sighing. Although the summer vacation was coming to an end and high school was about to begin, Tani also asked him to focus on his studies first. But after receiving the custom-made spider suit from Tani, Peter couldn't help but put it on and wanted to go outside to see if there were any crimes that could be stopped. If only there was a chance for Spider-Man to make his debut. Debut as a newbie hero, amaze the world with a single brilliant feat, let Tani and Mr. Kale take a good look, lest they always think of him as a child. Peter was fantasizing about his heroic dream when a crow flew over his head and almost pooped on the new spider suit. But in fact, since the alien war half a year ago, the ordinary guards and S.H.L.D. personnel have been strengthened, plus the symbol of peace, Iron Man, Captain America, and other superheroes are resident in New York. Crime is really not something that can be easily encountered. When the sun set and night fell, the city lit up with dazzling neon lights. Peter was alone in the cold wind at high altitude, took off the spider hood and rubbed his hair irritably. "No, really no. Forget it, let's go back. If I go back later, I'll be scolded by Aunt May again." Just as Peter the spider was about to stand up from the pendulum, a powerful explosion suddenly rang out from the neighboring street. Peter quickly looked over there and saw that on the 5th floor of a 5-star hotel, a red energy was breaking through the glass window. Inside the 5th floor, there was already a faint fire and it was about to spread. The incident really came. Peter opened his mouth in a daze and quickly put on the spider hood without thinking too much. With a wave of his right hand, the silk equipment on the wrist of the suit immediately ejected tough white spider silk to stick to the opposite building. Swinging high in the city, Peter rushed to the fire site at full speed. At this time, In a certain room on the 5th floor of a 5-star hotel. Quentin stood in the middle of the room, his whole body surrounded by ether energy. The overflowing violent energy destroyed all the furniture in the room, and the energy swept out uncontrollably. How wonderful, this feeling of being filled with power. Quentin was extremely excited. Use this power wisely and complete the mission I've given you. I'll give you even more power. Next to him, Loki smiled evilly. He opened the spatial fog and disappeared from the room along with the fog. As long as I have this power, I can become a superhero in the limelight, surpassing the symbol of peace in Iron Man. Quentin clenched his fists tightly, and the ether energy finally completely fused into his body. After a series of transformations, it actually materialized into a set of golden armor with a helmet. After the fire, the corridor on the 5th floor of the hotel was filled with thick smoke. Many guests fled downstairs in panic. Wow! A golden-haired girl fell to the ground in the corridor, crying and shouting, "Mom!" However, due to the thick smoke and the chaotic scene, no one noticed her. Just as the girl was about to be stepped on by the guests behind her, crack! The glass window shattered from the outside, and a bright red and blue figure rushed into the 5th floor of the hotel from the outside. He slid swiftly along the corridor, cleverly avoiding the chaotic crowd while holding the golden-haired girl on the ground in his arms. The golden-haired girl stopped crying and raised her red and swollen eyes to see a friendly face with a spider mask. My name is Spider-Man, I'm your friendly neighbor. Don't cry, I'll get you out of here, okay? Peter finished speaking in a very fast tone. After the golden-haired girl nodded, he immediately rushed out of the window and jumped down. Midway, he connected the spider silk to slow down and landed in front of the 5-star hotel like a swing. After safely putting the golden-haired girl on the ground, Peter waved his hand. Stay here and don't move. Wait for your family to find you. I'll go take care of the trouble upstairs first. As soon as he finished speaking, he launched the spider silk again and swung it toward the 5th floor of the hotel, where black smoke and flames were billowing out. The whole process of saving someone for the first time was smooth and natural. Even Peter was a little impressed by himself. However, just as he swung in the air, a figure suddenly rushed out of the window on the 5th floor and flew over his shoulder. That is. Peter hung upside down on the outer wall of the hotel like a spider. He looked up at the sky and only saw a mysterious man wearing a glass helmet and armor. His tail left behind a red smoke trail as he flew at high speed and was about to disappear at the end of the night sky. He can actually fly. Red smoke. Peter suddenly remembered that the red energy that caused the fire just now was similar to the red smoke left behind by the mysterious man. The other party was very likely to be the perpetrator of this incident. If I don't chase after him, he'll run away. Peter was about to launch the spider silk and chase after the mysterious man, but inside the hotel the guests' cries for help came again. Peter hesitated for a while, but still gave up chasing and returned to the hotel to save people first. 5 minutes later. When Peter rescued the last person with a burnt smell, police cars and fire trucks arrived late with sirens blaring. Most of the 5th floor of the hotel was enveloped in flames. While no one was paying attention, Peter launched the spider silk and swung it high to the rooftop of the high-rise building next to him. Taking off the spider helmet, Peter's hair was wet and sweaty from the previous fire. Fortunately, the spider suit had a strong sweat-absorbing function. Who was that person just now? Peter looked down at the fire scene where the situation was under control, and then looked in the direction where the mysterious man disappeared. Should I report to Mr. Kale or Mr. Stark? Peter quickly dismissed the idea. It was just a fire. If he had to report such a small matter to the two, he would really be treated like a child. I hope I can meet him again next time and let Spider-Man arrest him. Peter made up his mind, but before he could act cool for 3 seconds, his face suddenly changed. By the way, it's now 7 o'clock in the evening. I have to go to the high school tomorrow to report as a freshman. Thinking of this, Peter was like a child who had done something wrong. He hurriedly launched the spider silk and swung it in the direction of home. Peter did not even notice that on the rooftop of the building next to him, there was a figure hidden in the darkness. After seeing Peter leave, the figure shook his head gently. What a child. On the other side, Hank Pym's villa in New York City. Hank Pym and his daughter, Hope, were sitting in front of a computer chair, looking at the screen and secretly filming a young man in a video. To be more precise, it was a thief who had just been released from prison. Hope raised her eyebrows coldly and questioned, Hank, the suitable candidate you mentioned is him? A former professional thief? Hope, will it kill you to call me Daddy? Hank Pym glanced at her, then looked at the video again and said with certainty, "Believe me, I won't be wrong. He is the best candidate for the second generation of Ant-Man." You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.